What if power was a venomous snake coiled around your throat, ready to strike the moment you dared to breathe? Welcome to the Khmer Empire, where the crown weighs heavier than a mountain of gold, and the throne is a precarious perch above a pit of treachery. You think ruling this ancient marvel, a lush tapestry of temples, rice paddies, and intrigue, is a dream? Think again. The moment you ascend, every shadow becomes a potential assassin, every ally a possible usurper. How long would you last before the whispers of your enemies turned into a deafening roar? In a world where a single misstep can send you tumbling into oblivion, the lessons from history scream through the ages. The Khmer Empire devours the weak. Picture a realm where divine right meets nightmarish reality, where the gods themselves laugh at the folly of man, and where betrayal is as common as the rice that feeds the masses. Your courtiers? Wolves in silk. They'll sing your praises while plotting your demise over a banquet of roasted duck and fermented fish. You, the benevolent ruler, with dreams of expanding your territory, only to find yourself embroiled in a deadly game of chess, where pawns become queens, and queens become corpses. The blood-stained history of the Khmer chronicles those who thought they could play at guardhood, only to discover they were mere pawns in an even darker game. Ever heard of Jayavarman VII? That guy ruled like a rock star, building temples that still baffle modern architects, yet he faced rebellion after rebellion. Did he survive? Sure. But at what cost? The screams of the fallen echo through the ruins of Angkor, remnants of a civilization that devoured its leaders whole. You think you can handle that pressure? Think again. Famine strikes, droughts scorch the land, and the weight of your subjects' expectations presses down like a boulder. You'd have to juggle foreign invasions and internal strife like a circus performer on a tightrope, all while your people pray for a ruler who can keep the gods satisfied. One wrong ritual, one missed offering, and the heavens open to rain down calamity. Spoiler, the gods aren't forgiving. You might think you can charm the peasants with grand speeches and lavish festivals. But when their bellies rumble louder than the drums of war, your charisma will turn to ash. When the scent of rotten fish wafts through the air, and the cries for food crescendo into a symphony of despair, your throne will become a hot seat, one that could melt even the most ironclad ruler. So, what makes you think you stand a chance? The Khmer Empire is a beast, an unpredictable, ravenous beast hungry for power, blood, and the fall of its rulers. The allure of the throne is intoxicating, but remember this, once you taste the poison of power, there's no antidote. One wrong move, and the empire will swallow you whole, leaving your name as just another faded echo in the annals of history. Dare to step into this trap? You've been warned. The air was thick with tension, a storm brewing on the horizon as night descended like a velvet shroud over Angkor. The cries of men echoed through the darkness, punctuated by the metallic tang of fear and sweat. I remember crouching behind the crumbling stones of an ancient temple, heart pounding like a war drum, my breath hitching in my throat. Shadows danced, flickering torches, desperate faces caught in a moment of panic. The Khmer Empire was a dream on the brink of chaos, and I, a mere whisper in its grand narrative, felt the weight of history pressing down upon me. The moon hung low, a ghostly observer to the unfolding drama, casting eerie silhouettes of warriors clad in worn leather and rusted bronze. They were not just men, they were fathers, sons, brothers. And yet, tonight, they were about to become something else entirely, an unstoppable force or a tragic sacrifice. I remember Suryavarman, his face a mask of determination, eyes alight with fierce ambition. He stood tall, a figure carved from stone, yet beneath that exterior lay a tempest of doubt and dreams. How to unite a kingdom teetering on the brink? He had visions of temples that would scrape the heavens, of waters that would nourish the land, but here, in this moment, all he could see was the blood-soaked ground beneath his feet. What cost would power demand? Beside him, there was Dany, a woman whose spirit was as wild as the wind, as unpredictable as the monsoon rains. Her laughter would ring clear in the marketplace, cutting through the murmur of life like a sharp blade, but tonight she stood at the precipice of despair. She had lost her brother to the cruel hands of fate, and the anger simmering within her was a beast that threatened to consume her whole. Her heart ached with the raw intensity of love and loss, a dichotomy that tore at her insides. Dany had once believed in the shimmering dreams of the Empire, but now she questioned everything. I remember the cries coming from the edge of the city, the desperation palpable, a distant reminder of what they fought for, and under the weight of that sound, a chill ran through me. The kingdom was alive, pulsing with hope and fear, and the boundaries between them blurred like the horizon at dusk. Power was a beast, ravenous and insatiable, and Suryavarman sought to tame it. Would he succeed, or would it consume him whole? Do you think it's worth it? Dany asked, her voice trembling as if she were afraid the words might shatter the night. What if we lose everything? Defiance etched itself across Suryavarman's face, a storm brewing in his chest. What if we gain everything? The resolve in his tone sent shivers through the air, electric and charged, igniting a flicker of hope within her. But I sensed the doubt that lingered beneath the surface, a whisper of uncertainty that clawed at them both. The moonlight cast ghostly shadows over the stone walls, and in that moment, I saw the spectres of their pasts rise before them, fading memories of laughter, of love, of a kingdom that once thrived. The ghosts of ambition and regret intertwined, weaving a tapestry of fate that neither of them could escape. They were caught in a web spun from dreams and reality, and the delicate balance was tipping. The tension thickened as distant drums echoed in the night, reverberating through the earth, summoning warriors to the fray, a cacophony of life and death spiraling into chaos. I could almost taste the adrenaline, the metallic essence of fear mingled with the sweetness of hope. Would they march into the storm, or would they turn back, cowering in the shadows, hiding from their destinies? Time stretched and twisted, a cruel, merciless creature laughing at their indecision. Every heartbeat was a countdown, every breath a reminder of the impending clash. I could see the flicker of fear in Dany's eyes, shadows of memories she wished would stay buried. They bathe once a year, she quipped, laughter tinged with bitterness. So yeah, romance is earthy. Her humor was a fragile shield against the encroaching darkness. And then the moment arrived, a flash of steel and the roar of the crowd. The clash of swords rang like a death knell, shattering the stillness of the night. Suryavarman's heart raced, a wild rhythm in the tempest of battle. He charged forth, propelled by the weight of destiny, fueled by dreams that now felt insurmountable. With every swing of his sword, he was carving his name into the annals of history, but at what cost? Would the Empire rise from the ashes like a phoenix, or would it crumble to dust, leaving nothing but ghosts behind? There, amidst the chaos, Dany's voice rose above the clamor, a battle cry forged from pain, a fierce declaration against the night. She fought not just for her brother, but for the very soul of the Empire, a testament to resilience in the face of despair. With every strike, her grief transformed into power, a raw, unfiltered force, echoing the heartbeat of a kingdom that refused to die. But in the shadows, doubt lurked like a spectre, whispering dark promises of failure, reminding them of every sacrifice yet to come. The air crackled with uncertainty, a storm of ambition and loss spinning out of control. As they fought, as they bled, their lives wove together in a tapestry of hope and heartbreak, a dance of destiny that would shape the foundations of a mighty empire. And in that fleeting moment, as the clash of steel rang in my ears and the chaos enveloped me, I understood, this was only the beginning, an introduction to a saga that would ripple through time, echoing in the hearts of those who dared to dream. The foundation of power was being laid, its weight resting on the shoulders of those brave enough to confront the darkness. In the heart of turmoil, dreams and fears intertwined, an unbreakable bond, forever resonating into the night, an unending cycle of love and loss, of ambition and despair, their story not ending but transforming, blooming like the fierce lotus in murky waters. And as the night deepened, the echoes of their struggle became the very heartbeat of the Khmer Empire, a haunting melody that would not soon be forgotten. The rain fell in sheets, a curtain of silver that blurred the line between earth and sky. I stood at the edge of the ancient city, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and unspoken stories. The streets, slick and glistening, were empty, haunted by the weight of history. Shadows danced in the corners of my mind, whispering secrets held too long, and I felt the pulse of the empire all around me, a beating heart beneath the dense canopy of the jungle. A low rumble echoed, a distant thunder that could just as easily be the growl of a discontented populace. I turned my thoughts to Sari, whose passion for this land burned like a wildfire. She was the sun and the storm, a whirlwind of emotion, her heart caught between the past and the shimmering future she dreamed of. I remember the way her eyes sparkled with fervor, with hope. But inside, the turmoil raged. "This land is ours," she would say, her voice fierce yet trembling. "But it's slipping away." And then there was Rian, a shadow of a man, burdened by loyalty and fear. He stood at the nexus of power, his soul caught in a vice of conflicting loyalties. I could see the fire in him, but it flickered and waned, dulled by the weight of expectation. The empire's geography stretched around us, an intricate tapestry woven of mountains that loomed like ancient sentinels, rivers that wound like veins through the flesh of the land, and lush forests that whispered secrets only the wind could grasp. "How can we be free?" he would mutter to himself in the quiet of the night, "when the very ground we walk on is chained to the past?" His voice trembled with the echoes of ancestors long gone. I could see it in his furrowed brow, in the set of his shoulders. He was lost, trapped between duty and desire, between the empire that sought to hold him and the vast world beyond its borders. As the rain intensified, a thunderous drumbeat against the rooftops, I felt the tension crackle in the air. The significance of this empire, steeped in a culture that was an intoxicating blend of tradition and innovation, swirled around us like the mist rising from the ground. It was a land where the sacred and the mundane intertwined, where market stalls overflowed with vibrant textiles, spices that ignited the senses, and laughter that echoed against ancient stone. I remember the old woman's hands, gnarled and weathered, weaving tales into her baskets as she skillfully crafted them. Each twist of the palm frond was a story, each knot a memory. This was not just commerce, this was life, woven together with threads of joy and sorrow, of triumph and despair. The empire's people moved like a river, fierce and flowing, their hearts beating in time with the drums of festivals that lit the night sky ablaze with color. But shadows loomed. I could feel them, dark, creeping, insidious. The empire's legacy was stained with the blood of its own. Each celebration was undercut by the knowledge of those who had been silenced, the echoes of their cries intermingling with the laughter of the living. I found myself haunted by the ghosts of those whose dreams had been crushed beneath the weight of ambition and greed. "Are we fighting for a future?" Sari would implore, her voice breaking, "or merely trying to reclaim what was stolen?" Her passion could ignite revolutions, but in moments of despair, it felt like a fragile flame, so easily extinguished. Rian stood beside her, his heart heavy. "It's not just about the land," he said, his voice a low rumble, thick with emotion. "It's the people. They deserve more than this." He turned his gaze toward the horizon, where the mountains kissed the sky, where the sun dipped low in a blaze of crimson. I could see the struggle within him, the battle between the duty he felt to the empire and the pull of a freedom that felt more like a dream than a promise. The empire itself was a living entity, its geography a contradiction, a canvas of both beauty and brutality. Islands emerged from crystalline waters like emerald jewels, the jungles whispered secrets to the night, their shadows hiding mysteries older than time. And still, the incessant march of progress threatened to erase the old ways, to drown the voices that sang of a time when the world was simpler, when the heart of the land beat untainted by greed. I remember standing in the marketplace, vibrant and alive, laughter echoing like music. Vendors called out their wares, the air thick with the aromas of grilled meats and sweet fruits. I watched as Sari danced between the stalls, a living embodiment of joy, of hope. But in the back of my mind, a nagging doubt grew, a reminder that all this could vanish, like mist at dawn. Every heartbeat echoed the empire's significance in Southeast Asia, a tapestry of cultures, languages, and beliefs, a mosaic that both united and divided. The significance lay not just in the land, but in the people who walked upon it, who breathed life into its ancient stones. As the storm raged outside, it felt like a harbinger of change. The rain pounded down, washing away the dust of centuries while stirring up the hidden fears of a population yearning for freedom. The tension built, a taut string ready to snap, a moment waiting to explode. I stood in the eye of the storm, feeling the pulse of the land beneath my feet, the cries of the past ringing in my ears. The empire was alive, a force of nature, and in the hearts of Sari and Rian lay the future, shimmering on the brink. But as the clouds gathered and the wind howled, I knew this was just the beginning. The echoes of history would not be silenced easily. The clash between past and future hung in the air, thick and electric, as the rain drummed a relentless beat, a countdown to the moment when everything would change. The air crackled, thick with the scent of burning incense mixed with the sharp tang of iron. I stood in the shadow of the altar, heart thundering in my chest, the rhythmic pulse drowning out the distant clang of swords and the wails of the forgotten. A storm raged outside, the heavens weeping for a kingdom on the brink of collapse. I watched as flames flickered across the faces of the loyal, their eyes wide with fervent belief, yet doubt lurked in the corners, whispering insidiously, "What if this king is not what he seems?" Prince Alaric knelt before the altar, his brow glistening with sweat, the weight of expectation pressing down like a leaden cloak. He was young, too young for the crown, yet there was a fierceness in his gaze that sparked a mixture of hope and fear in those who dared to look upon him. The whispers of his lineage danced through the air like restless ghosts. They claimed he was chosen, divinely appointed, but all I could see were the cracks forming on the surface of his bravado. Each prayer he uttered felt more like a plea than a declaration, and I wondered if he could feel the chains of destiny tightening around his throat. "Alaric!" I shouted, my voice slicing through the heavy air. "This is madness. You cannot carry the weight of 1,000 souls on your shoulders." His eyes locked onto mine, a storm brewing within their depths. "And yet, I must." The resolve in his voice sent shivers down my spine, a chilling reminder of the burden he bore. To falter is to allow chaos to reign. I wanted to reach out and shake him, to plead with him to reconsider, but there was no room for doubt in his world. Outside, the wind howled like a banshee, as if echoing the tumult within our hearts. The kingdom had been drowning in the shadows of despair for too long, and Alaric, with his divine claims, was the lighthouse guiding us back to the shores of hope, or so we believed. Yet the more I looked at him, the more I saw a boy lost in a labyrinth of expectation, the walls closing in as his destiny loomed ever larger. And then there was Mara. Fierce and indomitable, her spirit crackled like fire against the cold steel of our reality. She stood by the entrance, an ethereal figure, her wild hair framing a face marred by grief and rage. "Do you think the gods will save us?" she spat, her words dripping with sarcasm, yet laced with a fervent yearning. "What have they ever done but watch us bleed?" Her eyes flickered toward Alaric, a tempest of emotion swirling within her. "You think being crowned will change anything? You think that throne will protect you?" Alaric's shoulders tensed, the weight of his divine kingship suddenly feeling like an anchor dragging him into the abyss. Mara stepped forward, her voice a whip crack in the silence. "Look around you. The people are starving while you play at being a god. We need a leader, not a puppet." The storm intensified, rain lashing against the stone walls like 1,000 desperate hands clawing for release. Each drop felt like a reminder of the lives lost, the promises broken, and the fears that gnawed at our very souls. I could see Alaric teetering on the precipice, the facade of strength threatening to crumble. He was a boy masquerading as a ruler, trying to embody the impossible. "I remember the stories," I whispered, feeling the tremor of memories surfacing, the tales of kings anointed by the heavens, shining armor, and noble quests. But those stories had never spoken of the solitude that came with the crown, the endless nights spent wrestling with demons of doubt. They bathed once a year. "So yeah, romance was earthy," I joked, my voice strained, but the laughter felt hollow. But there was nothing funny about the shadows lurking behind Alaric's determined stare. I could see them creeping in, the anxiety clawing at his insides, making him question every decision as if the very threads of fate were unraveling in his hands. Mara, sensing his struggle, softened for a moment. "You don't have to carry it alone," she urged, her voice becoming a lure, drawing him closer to a truth he had yet to acknowledge. "We're here with you. Let us help you bear this burden." And in that moment, the weight of their shared history crackled between them, heavy with the unspoken. I felt the air shift, a sigh echoing through the dim chamber, as if the very walls were listening, watching, holding their breath in anticipation. The cosmos spun around us, teetering on the edge of something monumental, something inevitable. But the storm outside raged on, a tempest growing larger, a reminder that the real battle lay ahead. I could feel the clock ticking, each second spiraling toward an unknown fate. Alaric's hands clenched into fists, shaking with the weight of his choices. "I will not fail them," he declared, but the tremor in his voice betrayed the fear that lay just beneath the surface, like a crack in the earth waiting to swallow us whole. I wanted to shout at him, to shake sense into his stubborn skull. But I knew that, in this moment, the burden of kingship was his to bear alone. And as his eyes flicked back to Mara, a silent agreement ignited between them, a pledge forged in the fires of shared pain and relentless hope. The storm continued to howl, shadows dancing around us like specters, a reminder that the real fight was yet to come, the burden of divine kingship weighing heavy, a mantle soaked in the blood of sacrifice, the echoes of lost dreams, the haunting cries of a people yearning for salvation. Each heartbeat pulsated, a reminder that we were teetering on the edge of destiny, our souls intertwined by the burden of a crown that was as heavy as it was dazzling. And as the echoes of their resolve filled the air, I knew we were all caught in this tempest, each of us praying for the dawn to break, for a flicker of light in the encroaching darkness. The sky bled crimson as the sun tore itself into the horizon, the world holding its breath, a moment suspended, a heartbeat in time. The air thickened, heavy with the scent of smoke and desperation. I stood on the balcony, the weight of the crown pinching my brow, a relentless reminder of what I was. King. God King. A title that rang like a curse in my ears. Below, the streets roiled with furor, the cries of the people rising like a storm, their faces twisted in anguish, hope dying in their eyes. They were not wrong to expect salvation. But what did a god know of salvation? Your Majesty! A voice cut through the chaos, sharp as a blade. It was Alaric, my advisor, his face pale as he rushed up the steps. The council demands your presence. They fear the uprising, they want blood. His eyes darted to the crowd, a flicker of something dark dancing behind them. Was it fear? Or ambition? They believe you must act, or watch it all burn. Act! The word tasted like ash on my tongue. I remembered my father's last moments, the throne room thick with the smell of betrayal, the weight of expectations crushing him like a boulder. You are not just a man, but a vessel, he had whispered, voice trembling. A god among men. They will worship you, or they will tear you apart. I shivered, the memory wrapping around me like a shroud. Tell them to wait, I said, the words slipping from my lips as if I were casting a spell. Give me time. Time, what a fickle mistress. A whispering ghost that taunted me with its elusiveness. Alaric's shoulders tensed, his loyalty warring with his growing dread. Majesty, you cannot afford to show weakness. They expect strength, they expect a god. A god. What did that even mean? I thought of the stories, the ancient tales of rulers who wielded lightning and commanded the stars, and I laughed, a hollow sound amid the discord below. Any god I had glimpsed was a shadow, a whisper of power that faded with every dawn. I was merely a man caught in a storm of my own making. And then there was Seraphine. Sweet Seraphine, my sister, her laughter a balm smeared over this world of anguish. She skirted the edges of the palace, her presence a flicker of light in this encroaching darkness. Please, she had begged just days before, don't become them. Don't lose yourself. But what did she know of loss? Of the expectations that clung to me like a second skin? The people needed a god king, not a brother. I saw her now, standing at the foot of the grand staircase, her eyes wide, searching. I remember, she said softly, when father used to tell you bedtime stories, how you vowed to protect our people. Protect. A word that tasted like honey and poison all at once. And what if I can't? I whispered, the weight of my own doubt hanging heavy in the air. What if I am not enough? The shadows flickered, the torches casting monstrous shapes around us, darkness laughing at our vulnerability. Then become enough, she replied, her voice steady, defiant, an ember in the storm. You owe it to them, to us, to yourself. You must be the god they need. But how could I be a god? I was a collection of fears and dreams, doubts mingled with a longing for something greater than myself. It was in that moment I realized the enormity of the crown I wore, a burden that twisted my very soul. I could feel the eyes of the people seeping through the stone walls, dissecting me, expecting salvation from my blooded hands. Outside, the roar of the crowd crescendoed, a tidal wave of anger and pain threatening to break against the gates of our sanctuary. I closed my eyes, every heartbeat a drum echoing in my chest. What was it to be a ruler? A god? To stand on the precipice of a decision that could plunge us into chaos or lift us into the heavens. Alaric's hand gripped my shoulder, grounding me. It's time, my liege. The council awaits. They want blood and they will have it, unless you give them hope. His breath was hot against my ear, urgency crackling through him. Hope. Like a moth drawn to the flame, I could feel it flickering in the distance, just out of reach. What if I could grasp it? What if I could wield it like a weapon? Very well, I said, voice steadier than I felt. Let them see me. Let them believe. As I turned away from the balcony, leaving behind the chaos, I glanced back one last time. The sun had disappeared, shadows stretching long across the cobblestones, the city shrouded in a blanket of darkness. I could feel the pull of the crowd, a desperate longing for reassurance, for guidance. They would see their God King, but which version of me would they find? As I stepped into the great hall, a hush fell over the assembly, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I could feel their stares, the weight of their expectations pressing down like 1,000 hands. Every face bore the scars of uncertainty, some etched with anger, others glimmering with fragile hope. And there, among the council, was Lord Cedric, his eyes glinting with ambition, a predator masked in the guise of loyalty. Your Majesty, he began, voice smooth as silk, the time has come. Show them you are more than just a man. Show them you are a god. But what if I had to sacrifice my humanity to wear that cloak? What if the price of kingship was my soul? I glanced at Alaric, whose expression mirrored my own turmoil. We were bound by blood and ambition, the lines between loyalty and betrayal blurring with every heartbeat. In that moment, I understood, the throne was not a seat of power, but a crucible burning with expectation. If I was to rise, I would have to claw my way through the ashes of my own fears. It was not just my crown at stake, but the very essence of what it meant to be a ruler, a god among mortals. And in that, I found my resolve. Let them come, I declared, voice resonating in the silence, a promise etched in the air. I will not falter. I will not break. I am their God King, and I will rise. The crowd roared, a tidal wave of sound crashing against the walls, and I felt the weight of my choice settle deep within me. I was about to step into the fire, but I would not go alone. I would take each soul with me, bound by hope and fear, into the unknown. And as we stood on the brink of chaos, I could feel it, the genesis of something greater, and the understanding that I was not just a man, but a beacon, a flickering light against the endless night. The world was watching, and in that dreadful silence, I knew I had but one choice. To embrace the gloom or to forge my own light. The promise hung in the air, electric and alive. And the confrontation was only beginning. The castle stood on the hill like a jagged tooth, scraping the sky, as the wind howled its mournful song through the battlements. I remember being frozen there, heart pounding, the kind of silence that grips your throat, leaving only the echo of your breath in your ears. The night was thick with betrayal, and the shadows danced like phantoms in the corners of my mind. I could almost hear the whispers of the noble families, their voices slithering through the darkness, plotting, scheming. They wore their titles like armor, impenetrable, but inside, they were all just rats gnawing at the same piece of cheese, too consumed by their own greed to notice the trap closing in. Lady Ilara stood at the balcony, her silhouette framed against the moon, a heartbroken queen on the edge of her crumbling kingdom. I saw her hands, trembling as they gripped the stone, the skin pale as though the night had drained her of color. They'll come for us, she whispered, voice brittle like old parchment, the moment they think we're weak. I wanted to reach out, to tell her she was wrong, that we couldn't be touched. But behind her eyes, I saw the truth, a haunting reflection of fear, a ghost twisting in her every thought. She was a noble born to power, but beneath the finery, she wore desperation like a shroud. Then there was Lucan, the brooding knight, a tempest of turmoil. I found him pacing the dim corridors, muttering to himself, a man caught in a storm of loyalty and betrayal. I remember when honor meant something, he spat, fists clenched. Now it's just a joke. A cruel jest played out by those who feast while the rest of us starve. I felt the fire in his words, raw and unfiltered, a burning rage directed at the very families that held our lives in their hands. He was a warrior, yes, but he was also a man torn in two, a heart fighting against the chains of his lineage. I wanted to tell him to let it go, to stop carrying the weight of a world that didn't care about the kind of man he was. But deep down, I knew he would never abandon his honor, even as it threatened to consume him. The night deepened, its inky fingers curling around us, wrapping tighter, closer. I could almost taste the fear in the air, thick and metallic, like blood freshly spilled. "They are like wolves," I said to Ilara, my voice low, a mere whisper. "They will hunt us, and there's no mercy in their eyes. They'll pick us apart." I could see her shiver, the resolve in her bones wavering. She was afraid, and I was afraid for her. I wanted to scream, to shake her out of her stupor, to drag her from the edge of that abyss. But the truth hovered in the air. How could I save her when I was just as lost? Lucan stopped pacing, his eyes burning with intensity, haunted by ghosts of decisions past. "We can't trust anyone, not even each other," he said, his voice a low growl. "The noble houses will turn us against one another. They'll use our fears like knives." I wanted to protest, to tell him that our bond was stronger than their lies, but doubt was a serpent coiling around my heart, squeezing until I could barely breathe. What if the betrayal came from within? What if Ilara or Lucan turned against me, blinded by ambition or fear? The shadows shifted, flickering like candle flames, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure lurking just beyond the edge of the light, a fleeting glimpse of a traitor, perhaps, or maybe my own paranoia manifesting. I couldn't help but chuckle, bitter and hollow. "Look at us," I said, trying to lighten the suffocating gloom. Three noble souls, caught in a melodrama worthy of the court, fated to be undone by our own theatrics. But my laughter felt foreign, like a ghost with no home. The truth was we were drowning, caught in the undertow of our own fears, and the noble houses were sharks circling above us, waiting for the right moment to strike. Ilara turned, and for the briefest moment, I saw a glimmer of steel in her gaze. "Then we must strike first," she said, fierce and unyielding. The word set off a tremor in my chest, a flicker of hope mingled with dread. Was this the path we were meant to take? Could we become the hunters instead of the hunted? But the weight of her resolve was heavy, an anchor pulling us deeper into a darkness we may never escape. "I remember the stories," I murmured, memories bubbling to the surface like froth on the edge of a storm. "How heroes fall, and kingdoms crumble." I could feel the air grow thicker, the tension palpable, a taut string waiting to snap. Is this how it ends? With us, three lost souls, swallowed by the shadows. Lucan's eyes were dark pools of emotion, stormy and fierce. "It doesn't end here. Not while there's breath left in my body." His vow hung in the air, a fragile promise weighted by uncertainty. Would he be able to uphold such a declaration? Could we trust the echoes of our own hearts when the world around us screamed betrayal? In that moment, I realized something vital. We were intertwined now, bound by our fears, our hopes, and our desperate need for redemption. The noble families had cast us into this dark labyrinth, but together we might just find our way out. I could feel the pulse of our collective heartbeat, the rhythm of a shared destiny, thumping against the walls of the castle. The night stretched before us, endless and daunting, a vast expanse filled with unseen dangers. Shadows flitted just beyond our reach, taunting us, but I could feel a flicker of light emerging from within, a glimmer of defiance against the encroaching darkness. We were three fragile souls teetering on the edge of something monumental, and the fear that had once gripped us was now an ember, sparking into a blaze. The wolves were coming. I could hear their howls in the distance, echoing through the night like a death knell. But we would not succumb quietly. We would fight. And in that moment, standing together against the tide of uncertainty, I was certain of one thing: we were just beginning to carve our names into the night. The night was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and the iron tang of blood, a heavy silence settling over the castle as shadows danced in the flickering torchlight. I stood at the edge of the grand hall, heart pounding in rhythm with the distant thunder, knowing that the storm wasn't just outside. It was here, inside these very walls, where loyalties flickered like the flames before me. Noble faces twisted with ambition, every glance a dagger, every whisper a noose tightening around the ruler's neck. I remember Lord Alaric, his brow furrowed with a desperate intensity, the weight of his family's legacy pulling him deeper into the mire. His mouth set in a grim line, he cast a furtive glance towards Lady Isolde. She stood across the hall, regal yet reckless, her dark eyes sparking like the embers in the hearth. "You would betray me for a throne of shadows?" Alaric's voice was a low growl, filled with raw anguish as he grappled with her betrayal. The air crackled, dense with history, love twisted into a weapon, each word a battle cry. And then there was King Cedric, at the center of it all, a fragile man wrapped in the robes of power he barely understood. I could see the lines etched into his face, a canvas of worry sketched by sleepless nights and the constant gnawing of doubt. "If they unite against me," he whispered, his voice barely a breath above the rustling of silk and brocade. His hands shook, the crown weighing heavy on his brow. I'd often chuckle at his absurdity, mighty kings reduced to whispering shadows of their former selves, but tonight, I felt an echo of his fear ripple through me. Would he become a ghost of kings past, a mere echo in the corridors of history? I remember when Cedric first ascended the throne, the cheers echoing in the cobbled streets, the glint of hope shining in every eye. But the laughter turned hollow, the feast became a funeral dirge as the nobles, once his allies, began to circle like vultures, hungry for his downfall. I could feel the weight of their expectations, the hunger for power that twisted their souls, making allies into enemies in a heartbeat. The game was cruel, a bloody dance of ambition and desire. "Trust is a fragile thing," Isolde had said, her voice a melody laced with poison. "One moment you're dancing on air, the next you're caught in a web of deceit." She smiled then, but it was a smile that could carve ice. Her ambition was a wildfire, consuming everything in its path. She sought not just power, but legacy, the kind that would echo through the ages, long after the fires of her enemies had been extinguished. I felt the energy of the room shift, the tension a palpable entity, wrapping around us like a noose. Whispers twisted into accusations, eyes darted furtively as alliances crumbled before my very eyes. Cedric's gaze swept over them, a tempest of uncertainty churning behind his facade of authority. "What am I without their loyalty?" he murmured, as I felt the sting of his despair pierce through the air like a dagger. The clock on the wall ticked ominously, each second a reminder of the inevitability creeping closer, a reminder that time was a relentless hunter. I watched as Alaric's and Isolde's eyes met across the room, a silent understanding passing between them, a pact blooming like a dark flower, a betrayal not yet spoken, but felt like an ember in the night. The stage was set, the players were ready, and the king's heart raced, a rapid drum heralding his doom. The tempest outside mirrored the chaos within, thunder rumbling like the voices of ancestors long silent, warning of the bloodshed yet to come. "They will come for you, Cedric," I whispered, my heart pounding with the urgency of 1,000 warnings. "You must choose." But his eyes, haunted and hollow, reflected a truth I feared was far too late to grasp. The court had become a battlefield, and he was the man caught in the crossfire, a king stripped of his power, a pawn in a game played by wolves. And just then, as if summoned by the storm, a crash echoed through the hall, a chilling reminder of how fragile the foundations of authority really were. The doors flung open, revealing a cloaked figure drenched in rain, eyes glinting with secrets that could unravel empires. "The people are restless," he called, voice slicing through the tension like a knife. A collective gasp rippled through the room, each noble's face a mask of disbelief, fear weaving its tendrils around their hearts. "I remember the faces of those who cheered for you, Cedric," the figure continued, stepping closer, his presence magnetic. "But now, they whisper your name in hatred." My pulse quickened, for in those words lay the heart of a rebellion, the realization that loyalty was as fickle as the weather, and the storm would not just be outside, it would erupt within. I could see it all unraveling, the delicate threads of trust snapping one by one, the shadows of betrayal looming over Cedric like a dark cloud. Stand strong or fall, I thought, my own heart pounding in sync with the chaos, echoing the weight of history that would judge him. There were no winners in this game, only ghosts left to haunt the echoes of the throne. The storm raged on, but inside the castle, it was the storm of ambition, fear, and shattered dreams that whipped through the grand hall, rattling the very foundations of power. The battle for supremacy had begun, and I was merely a witness, caught in the whirlwind of emotions and the chilling realization that no one had true authority in this world, only the illusion of it, and that fragile illusion was about to shatter. The clock continued to tick, each resounding chime a reminder that time was running out, and the world was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash to unfold. The air crackled with the pulse of impending chaos, a heartbeat of dread that thrummed in the very marrow of the earth. Shadows danced, flickering like restless spirits against the stone walls of the fortress as the sun dipped low, painting the horizon with blood-red hues. I remember the night of the first attack, the moment the siege bells rang out in mournful tones, shattering the fragile silence. The clang of metal on metal echoed, sending a shiver down my spine that lingered like a ghost long after the sound had faded. Around me, the soldiers moved, their faces a tapestry of fear and resolve. I saw Thomas, his hands trembling as he gripped the hilt of his sword, knuckles white against the threat of darkness. He was only a boy, barely 17, yet here he stood, guarding our home like a lion in the face of a tempest. He had a smile that could warm the coldest winter night, until that smile vanished, replaced by a look of haunted disbelief that twisted my heart. "I thought it was a game," he whispered, choking on the words. "But this is real, isn't it?" I remember the way his voice cracked, breaking the spell of youth. The laughter of our childhood felt like echoes from another life, swallowed by the horror creeping ever closer. Outside the walls, shadows loomed like a gathering storm, warriors of an enemy I dared not name. Each scream that pierced the night was a reminder of what was at stake, a reminder that innocence was a luxury we could no longer afford. Then there was Ilara, fierce and unyielding as the mountains that cradled our empire. She was a firebrand, her spirit a wild flame that consumed the doubts and fears that burned within me. I watched as she paced, breath quickening, her dark hair a tempest against the wind. "Keep your wits about you," she shouted, her voice cutting through the cacophony of panic. "This is not the end, it's just the beginning." But even as she said it, I caught the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, a whisper of dread that belied her bravado. I remember the first arrow that soared through the twilight, a dark comet streaking toward an uncertain fate. Time slowed, stretching like a taut string about to snap, as we all held our breath, hearts pounding in sync with the war drums. The moment it struck, a breath drawn in horror, a gasp of disbelief. It was Thomas's first, but it wouldn't be his last. The boy who had thought this was a game was now thrust into a waking nightmare, one from which there would be no awakening. "Stay close," Ilara commanded, her resolve a beacon in the chaos. And in that moment, standing shoulder to shoulder with them, I felt the weight of responsibility crash upon me like a tidal wave. I had to protect them. I had to shield Thomas from this unraveling world, to ensure Ilara's fire didn't extinguish in the face of despair. But how? My own fear clawed at me, gnashing like a beast desperate to escape its cage. Another volley unleashed, another arrow kissed the earth, snuffing out a life as easily as one might blow out a candle. I heard the cries of the wounded, a symphony of agony that harmonized with the clash of steel. I remember the taste of iron in my mouth, the metallic scent of blood and sweat mingling in the air, wrapping around us like a shroud of inevitability. "Fight!" Ilara screamed, charging forward, her sword gleaming like a star fallen from the heavens. I followed, driven by an instinct deeper than reason. I remember the moment my blade met flesh, the sickening squelch, the warmth that spread, far too intimate for a battlefield. Each enemy fell before us, yet with every swing, I felt an echo of regret. These were lives, not faceless foes. These were men, perhaps with families, perhaps with dreams and fears just like ours. But in the world we inhabited, mercy was a luxury we could not afford, a truth that twisted like a dagger in my heart. I could see Thomas falter, his hands shaking, eyes wide with fear. I reached for him amid the chaos, pulling him close, whispering words of courage that felt hollow and broken. "You are strong. You have to be strong." But my voice was a crumbling edifice, and I could see the fear in his eyes morph into something darker, something that whispered of surrender. With each clash, the walls of our fortress felt like a cage closing in on us. The sun bled out, shadows stretching ever longer, threatening to engulf everything we had known. Memories flickered in my mind like the dying embers of a fire. laughter by the river, the whisper of leaves, a sweet song that now felt like an echo from a distant life. The moments of peace, so vividly alive, now felt like ghosts taunting us, reminding us of what we stood to lose. Fight! Ilara's voice pierced through, a rallying cry that surged through the chaos, igniting a fire in my chest. But even as I rallied beside her, I felt the weight of our reality crashing down. Defending the Empire was no longer just about steel and blood, it was about survival, about keeping the flickering flame of hope alive. The weight of the world pressed down, and the vast cosmos above seemed indifferent, watching us like a grand play, unaware of the stakes of our own tragic script. The battle raged on, and the cries of the fallen blended into a haunting melody, a requiem for all that was lost. I found myself drawn to Thomas, watching as he faced his fears like a candle flickering against the onslaught of a storm. I wanted to shield him, to protect him from this agony, but I knew I was powerless against the tidal wave of fate that surged forward. And then, in a moment of sheer terror, I felt the ground tremble beneath us, a quake that shivered through the walls like the breath of a great beast awakening. The enemy surged forward, a tide of dark intentions, and I felt the world shift around me. I knew then that the end was near, an inevitability that lurked in the shadows, waiting to take us all. But in that moment, among the chaos and agony, I also felt something else, a flicker of defiance, a refusal to succumb to despair. Together! Ilara shouted, and her voice rose above the din like a battle hymn, igniting a spark in the hearts of those who fought at her side. The tension was electric, a magnet pulling us together even as everything threatened to tear us apart. We were more than soldiers, we were the guardians of our dreams, our future, our very essence, and despite the fear that clawed at my insides, a surge of hope swept over me. It was then I realized, we were not merely defending an empire, we were fighting for our lives, for each other, and for every heartbeat that echoed in the night. The battle was far from over, and the shadows loomed larger than ever, but as I stood with Thomas and Ilara, I felt anchored in that moment, united against the storm. And in the tempest of chaos, amidst the screams and the clash of steel, I remembered. I remembered why we fought. I remembered that even in the darkest nights, stars still shone, faint, but persistent. In the chaos of battle, we were not alone. We were together, and together we would rise. The rain fell like 1,000 sharp arrows, relentless and cold, hammering against the earth with a ferocity that matched the pounding of hearts. Mud clung to boots and soaked into the fabric of uniforms, but that was the least of their worries. The air crackled with tension, a stench of iron and smoke mingling with the damp earth, a bitter perfume born of war, of lives torn asunder. I stood there, my breath shallow, watching the horizon blur into a chaotic canvas of dark clouds and flickering shadows, each a ghost of the fallen. I remember the way Ilara's hands trembled as she gripped her sword, knuckles white against the hilt. Fear snaked through her, a venomous whisper that told her every unspeakable truth. We could die here, she muttered, a confession wrapped in a question, pleading for reassurance that would not come. The weight of expectation was a suffocating cloak, draped over her shoulders like a shroud. She was a warrior forged in the fires of conflict, but even the strongest steel can bend. I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of doubt, the haunting of memories unspoken. Beside her, Torin stood like a statue, his jaw set, a fortress of resolve. He had once laughed with me beneath the sun, a boy with dreams like wildflowers. But that boy was buried deep, choked by the thorns of war. Now, he was a soldier, a blade honed by necessity, not desire. We have to hold the line, he said, his voice gravelly and low, as if he were convincing himself as much as us. I could hear the unyielding echo, *hold the line *, never falter *, the enemy is coming *. But what does it mean to hold a line when every heartbeat feels like a countdown to oblivion? I remember the stories they told us, the glories of battle, the honor of the fallen, the necessity of strength. They never spoke of the night spent wide awake, haunted by the cries of those who didn't make it back. The faces of friends, enemies, shadows of memories that refused to fade. The ground shook beneath us, a distant rumble that crescendoed into the thunder of hooves. The enemy was near, and with them came the relentless reminder of our own fragility. I remember how the world felt like it was tilting on its axis, a cosmic joke played by gods who reveled in our torment. Ilara's eyes met mine, and in that fleeting moment, 1,000 words exchanged. There was no promise, only an understanding that we were trapped in this absurd dance of survival. I could see the silhouettes emerging through the haze, dark figures outlined against the dim glow of a dying sun. Every heartbeat resonated like a war drum, pounding in my chest. I remember thinking of my mother, her laughter echoing in my mind, sweeter than the sound of blades clashing. Would she forgive me for wielding steel? For choosing the battlefield over the fields of home? Or would she curse my name, a ghost trailing behind me through the years? Torin, I said, voice barely above a whisper, what if we don't make it back? The question hung in the air, heavy and oppressive, a truth that needed no answer. But he turned, his gaze steady, penetrating. Then we fight. Because that's all we have left. There was a strange kind of solace in those words, a morbid comfort that wrapped around me like warm blood. The first clash erupted like thunder. Metal met metal in a cacophony of violence, a symphony of chaos that drowned out all reason. I remember the feel of the sword in my hand, a weight that both anchored and terrified me. Every swing, every thrust, was a battle not only against others but against the unsettling tides of fear that threatened to drown me. Ilara fought with a fierce grace, her blade a swift extension of her will. I watched her dance through the chaos, a flame in the night, fierce and unyielding. But even flames can flicker, can wane. I saw the moment when doubt crept in, when she hesitated just long enough for the enemy to strike. I remember screaming her name, a raw, desperate sound that seemed to get swallowed by the screams of war. Time twisted in those moments, elongating into a surreal nightmare. I remember the weight of a body crashing beside me, the thud of a life extinguished. It was a reminder of our mortality, of how quickly everything could unravel. Torin's face twisted in agony as he fought to protect her, and in that split second, I saw the boy he once was, lost, terrified, but fighting nonetheless. With every swing, every clash, I could feel something deep inside me unraveling. The pressure of constant warfare pressed down like a vice, squeezing out any shred of innocence we once held. We were not just fighting for our lives, we were grappling with the ghosts of our choices, the burden of our survival. And yet, amid the chaos, a flicker of humanity shone through. I remember the fleeting glances shared between enemies, the brief acknowledgement of shared pain. In those moments, it became clear that this dance of death was not just ours to bear. We were all victims of the same war, bound by an unbreakable thread of suffering. But the need for military prowess was an insatiable beast, demanding its tribute as we fought through the madness. I found myself locked in a grim embrace with the reality of our existence. We were warriors, yes, but we were also lost souls in a relentless storm, desperate for any semblance of peace. The clash of swords, the cries of the dying, the shattering of dreams, it all blurred into a single, haunting melody, echoing in the recesses of my mind. I remember looking for solace in the chaos, searching for something, anything, to cling to as the world spun out of control. And just when it seemed that the weight of despair would crush us all, I felt Ilara's hand against my arm, a grip fierce and unwavering. Together, she breathed, her voice cutting through the madness like a beacon in the dark. Together! The word hung in the air, a fragile promise amid the onslaught. We fought side by side, hearts pounding in time with the fury of battle. I remember the way her laughter rang out, wild and unrestrained, a defiance against the gloom that threatened to engulf us. In that moment, nothing else mattered but the strength of our bond, the will to survive. But even in the heat of battle, I knew this moment was not the end. The shadows of war stretched long and deep, wrapping around us like a shroud. As the clash of weapons faded into the background, a new reality loomed, one that would test the very fabric of our souls. The fight was never truly over, it was merely the beginning of another storm waiting to break. I could feel it, lurking just beyond the horizon, ready to swallow us whole. And so, we continued, caught in a cycle of violence and resolve, hearts heavy with the weight of what we'd lost and what lay ahead, struggling against the demons of our own making. Together, we would face the next battle, but the question that lingered in the air was never far from my mind, *at what cost? The sun hung low in the sky, a bloody orb casting long shadows over crumbling stone walls, the air thick with tension and the smell of damp earth. In the heart of the city, they gathered, men and women, faces etched in worry, fists clenched against an unseen enemy. Above them, the church spire pierced the heavens, a silent witness to the brewing storm below. The pulsating hum of whispered prayers intertwined with anxious mutterings, creating a symphony of fear and hope. I stood amongst them, the weight of their desperation pressing against my chest like a vice. My heart raced, each thud echoing the rallying cries of those who had placed their faith in the divine, only to find themselves caught in the crosshairs of a power struggle that threatened to consume us all. I remembered the night when the flame of rebellion ignited, the fervor of the people tearing through the streets like wildfire. I remembered the faces, grizzled veterans, wide-eyed children, and the haunting smile of Ruth, her brown eyes shimmering with a light that dared to defy the darkness. Ruth was a preacher's daughter, her voice a balm for the wounded souls who sought sanctuary in the church. But today, her words hung heavy in the air, laced with an urgency that could not be ignored. "We must stand together," she said, her hands trembling as she clutched the tattered Bible. "The Lord fights for us." The crowd wavered like a field of wheat, some swaying to her rhythm, others rooted in doubt. I watched as she poured her heart into the crowd, each syllable a pebble dropped into a still pond, rippling outward until someone shouted, "But what if the Lord has turned his back on us?" A chill snaked through me. What if? The question reverberated in the silence that followed, turning the air electric. It was Jonah, a former soldier with a haunted past, his voice rough like gravel. He stepped forward, eyes ablaze with a fervor that could rival the most zealous of preachers. "We've prayed," he shouted, his fist raised high. "We've begged for mercy, yet we're still trapped in this hell. What if faith is just a chain binding us to a greater tyranny?" The crowd stirred, whispers rising like a tide threatening to overwhelm us all. "Jonah!" I called out, my voice cracking like glass. "You speak heresy." But even as the words left my mouth, I felt the sting of truth behind them. What if the faith that had once guided us now shackled us, a noose woven from scripture and doctrine? The flickering light of the lanterns cast distorted shadows on the walls, the figures morphing into specters that mocked us. We were a city divided, a rift as deep as the ocean, yet as close as the breath in our lungs. Each person carried their own burden, Jonah with his ghosts of battle, Ruth with the weight of salvation, and me, caught in the crossfire of their conflicting souls, desperate to find a path that would not tear us apart. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet as the echoes of our ancestors whispered in the wind, their struggles and sacrifices a reminder of the unyielding grip of faith on our governance. The shadows lengthened, dark fingers curling around our hearts, squeezing tightly. "The church has become a machine, a puppet master playing us against one another," Jonah declared, his voice rising above the murmurs. "We are living under the guise of salvation while drowning in oppression. Will we let them wield religion as a weapon?" Ruth's face paled, the fire in her eyes flickering like a dying candle. "You're wrong," she cried, her voice breaking. "Faith can guide us. It can lead us to a better path." But as she spoke, I saw the doubt etched in her brow, the chasm in her heart widening. She was losing it, losing the faith that had been her anchor, and I felt the tremors of her realization ripple through the crowd. "Faith is not a sword," I shouted, my voice trembling with urgency. "But what if it has become a shield for those in power?" Ruth's gaze pierced me, the accusation sharp as a dagger. "You're suggesting we cast aside our beliefs? That we abandon hope? What then fills that void?" Silence, thick as fog, enveloped us. The crowd, a breathing entity, pulsed with uncertainty. I felt the weight of history pressing down. Kings had risen and fallen on the backs of faith, empires built on the bones of those who dared to challenge the sanctity of belief. Each story a reminder of the delicate balance between faith and governance, each soul a testament to the struggles entwined within. In that moment, I saw the clock tower strike, the ominous chime reverberating through our bones. Time was slipping away. The world outside our gathering continued, indifferent to our plight, while inside we were caught in an existential storm, each heartbeat a reminder of our fragility. And then it happened, a flash of movement. From the shadows stepped a figure clad in dark robes, their face obscured by a hood. The air turned electric, and a hush fell over us as the stranger raised a hand, a gesture that seemed to still the very heartbeat of the world. "You dare question the divine," their voice boomed, echoing off the ancient stones. "You dare challenge the very fabric that has held this city together." Every eye turned toward the figure, a collective intake of breath hanging heavy in the air. The moment stretched, soaked in tension as we confronted our own fears, our own demons. I could see Jonah's fists tighten, Ruth wavering like a candle in a tempest, my own heart racing with the knowledge that this confrontation would not end without sacrifice. But what sacrifice? The crowd, caught in a maelstrom of beliefs and doubts, swayed between hope and despair. I could almost taste the bitterness of betrayal, like ashes on my tongue, as the question loomed large: what role does faith play in our governance? The figure stepped closer, casting a long shadow over Ruth, Jonah, and me, a harbinger of the choices we were about to make. Our beliefs hung in the balance, perhaps about to fracture, perhaps ready to ignite a new flame of unity. In that charged silence, the ghost of uncertainty lingered, because in the echoes of history, in the whispers of faith, we were all just players on a stage, waiting for the next act to unfold. The bell tolled, a haunting echo that split the night, shaking the very air around me. It resonated through the cobbled streets of the city, a shuddering premonition that heralded the unthinkable. I stood there, just beyond the shadow of the cathedral, heart racing, breath shallow, as the flickering torchlight revealed a figure draped in the crimson fabric of authority. Father Thomas, with his piercing gaze, was nothing short of a storm ready to crash upon the fragile tranquility of our lives. I watched as the townsfolk gathered, a sea of anxious faces and trembling hands, each one clutching their own hope, or fear, depending on the angle of the light. The common folk spoke in muted tones, stealing glances at the gallows, the wood worn smooth by the hands of despair. A condemned man awaited judgment, a victim of politics wrapped in the suffocating embrace of faith. I could see him, pale as a ghost, bound and broken, a mere pawn in a game where divine right crowned kings and stripped men of their dignity. "Will the Lord's will be done?" they murmured, voices trembling like the last breaths of a dying flame. I remember each word as if etched into my very soul, their weight pressing down, heavy as stone. It wasn't just the fate of one man that hung in the balance, it was the very essence of our community, our beliefs, our identity. The political and the pious intertwining in a grotesque waltz, a dance of executioners and saviors. In that moment, my eyes caught not just Father Thomas but his sister, Lucia, standing to the side, her face a canvas of turmoil. Torn between her brother's resolute faith and her own empathy for the condemned, she felt the world shift beneath her. I saw her gasp, and for a fleeting second, I understood her struggle, love against duty, humanity against the edicts of the divine. I had known her laughter, her giddy tales of romance that danced between the praises of God. But tonight, that laughter was replaced by a silence so thick it threatened to choke her. "Lucia!" I wanted to scream, to reach out and pull her from this terrifying precipice. This was her brother, a man who believed that his every action was commanded by the heavens, yet his belief shrouded the truth. He was an architect of fear. I could see it in her eyes, the glimmer of rebellion, the flicker of doubt. "You don't have to stand here," I whispered, but the words felt like water spilled into the sand. She shook her head, her resolve as firm as the stone walls of the cathedral looming behind us. "If I leave now, I abandon him." Her voice quivered with the weight of her faith, echoing against the stones of history that had seen too many lives lost to the altar of political legitimacy. As the crowd's murmurs crescendoed, Father Thomas raised his arms, a priest invoking the wrath of a divine judge. "This is not just a trial of man, but a trial of faith. Our covenant is at stake." His voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding, sending chills down my spine. People responded like marionettes to the strings of his conviction, their cheers rising and falling, a cacophony of longing for answers, for absolution. But I, caught in the web of emotion, felt my heart strangle itself. Every shout, every plea echoed back 1,000 stories of sacrifice, of lives entangled in the relentless pursuit of divine approval. I remembered my mother's hands, worn and cracked from labor, whispering prayers that seemed to disappear into the void, unheard, unheeded. I murmured to myself, the way she used to hope, even when the world seemed so dark. Lucia turned to me, her eyes glistening with an unshed tear, the weight of her brother's choices pressing down on her. What if his faith is misplaced? What if we're wrong? There was a desperation in her voice that twisted my insides. We were drowning in a sea of obligation, tethered to the beliefs of those who wielded power like a weapon. The condemned man stood silent, his breath a whisper of defiance against the storm. I could see the flicker of rebellion in his eyes, a reminder that even in the face of divine wrath, there lay a spark of humanity fighting to survive. I remember, the word slipped from my lips, an incantation of memories, of every face I had seen turned away by the church as they sought redemption, only to find rejection. Forgive us, the crowd intoned, a chorus of the lost seeking solace in the divine. But I felt the sharp edge of betrayal beneath their prayers, a fracture in the very foundation of our existence. What was faith if it bound us to a fate we didn't choose? What was legitimacy when it danced on the strings of fear and blood? I understood then that this was more than a trial, it was the crucible of our collective souls. As Father Thomas's voice rose in fervor, promising salvation through sacrifice, I felt Lucia's hand grip mine, a lifeline thrown into the abyss. We must choose, she whispered fiercely, between blind obedience and the truth. The intensity swelled until it felt as if the heavens themselves held their breath, waiting for our decision to deconstruct the fragile edifice of righteousness that had been built on suffering. And then the clock struck, a chilling reminder that time was slipping away, each second a heartbeat closer to irreversible decisions. I could feel the pulse of the city, the rhythm of lives entwined with the politics of faith, a heartbeat laced with desperation and dreams shattered against the altar of authority. Stand up! I wanted to scream, to shatter the silence that hung like a shroud. But all I could do was watch as the weight of history bore down on our shoulders, the shadows of countless souls lost to the machinations of power whispering their warnings. The crowd surged, a tide of fervor and fear, and I clung to Lucia, feeling the tremors of her resolve course through me. In that moment, the world stood at a precipice, a breath held between faith and rebellion, between the sacred and the profane. The stakes were high, and the air crackled with tension. What we chose now would echo through the annals of time, shaping the very fabric of our existence, reminding us that the lines between piety and politics were as thin as a single thread, fraying at the edges under the weight of our choices. The clock ticks like a heart, a relentless countdown echoing through the air thick with tension. Each tick could be a hammer on an anvil, forging a fate that no one wants to accept. I stand there, frozen, my breath caught in my throat, a spectator in my own life, watching as the seams of our small town fray and unravel. The shadows stretch long and thin, creeping into doorways, swallowing the last remnants of summer light. It's as if the very fabric of our existence is being pulled apart, strand by strand. I remember the moment vividly, the day the power went out, the day the grocery store shelves stood bare. The day we realized we were all just marionettes, dancing on strings woven from economic dependence, and those strings were starting to snap. I remember Sarah, eyes wide, panic simmering just beneath the surface. "What are we going to do?" she whispered, her voice trembling like a fragile leaf caught in a tempest. Her hand cupped her face, as if that would stave off the reality crashing upon us. "Survive," I told her, though I wasn't sure I believed it. My own heart raced, each beat a desperate plea for clarity, for solutions. I could feel the weight of my father's expectations pressing down on me like a heavy pall. He had spent years working himself to the bone, convinced that hard work would shield us from the storms of life. But now? Now that shield was crumbling, and all we were left with was the stark truth: we were at the mercy of forces larger than ourselves. The streets were empty except for shadows, the echoes of laughter replaced by an eerie silence. I caught sight of Tom, my childhood friend turned reluctant leader, pacing near the old diner, its neon sign flickering like a dying star. He clenched his fists tightly, as if the very act of squeezing could crush the anxiety gnawing at his insides. "If we don't get food soon," his voice trailed off, but I could see it etched in his face, a haunting certainty that the worst was yet to come. What haunted us was not just the fear of hunger, but the gnawing realization that we'd built our lives on an illusion. The economy had become a beast, feeding on our dreams, our aspirations, and now it was turning its gaze upon us, hungry for more. I could feel the weight of the world pressing down, a suffocating shroud that stifled hope and laughter. I wanted to scream at the sky, to demand answers from the universe, but all that came was a whisper, a prayer lost in the void. As night fell, the stars blinked down at us like distant, uncaring gods, and I felt a chill creep into my bones. We gathered at Tom's house, a ragtag assembly of desperate faces, lit only by the flickering glow of our phones. The light cast shadows that danced along the walls, elongating our fears until they loomed larger than life. "What do we do?" Sarah implored, her voice cracking under the weight of uncertainty. We were not warriors, we were survivors, and the battle was against a tide we couldn't see. Echoes of laughter turned to whispers of desperation. I caught Tom's eye, and in that glance, a silent agreement formed. We'd fight for our existence, for a sliver of normalcy. "We'll raid the old mill," I said, surprising even myself. There was a madness in the idea, an adrenaline rush that coursed through my veins. "We can find something there." Sarah's eyes flared with fear, but I saw the flicker of hope behind the dread. "What if we get caught?" she asked, and I could hear the quiver in her voice. It was the same fear that gnawed at me, the specter of uncertainty that loomed larger with each passing moment. The government was teetering, the rich growing richer while we struggled to scrape by, and the idea of being discovered, of being punished for our desperation, was a terrifying thought. But what choice did we have? There was a ghost in that mill, a memory of what was once a thriving community, now reduced to decay and shadows. In the end, it was the darkness that propelled us forward, a shared recklessness that bound us together. As we slipped through the night, hearts pounding like war drums, I felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with dread. Each step into the unknown became a testament to our fragility and our resilience. I could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on me, the consequences looming just out of sight. The mill stood like a forgotten giant, its skeletal frame silhouetted against the starless sky. I pushed the door open, and it creaked like an old man warning us to turn back. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of rust and regret. We moved cautiously, our flashlights piercing the darkness, illuminating remnants of what once was a rusted conveyor belt, piles of forgotten grain, a reminder of prosperity turned to dust. And then we found it. A stash, hidden away like a dirty secret. Cans of food, dusty and forgotten, yet still glimmering with promise. Hope surged through me, a tidal wave crashing against the shores of despair. It was enough to feed us, to sustain us for days, maybe even weeks. But just as quickly as the hope rose, it fell, a stark reminder of the reality that awaited us outside these crumbling walls. "Do we take it?" Tom's voice wavered, a question hanging heavy in the air. "What if someone sees us?" Sarah looked to me, and in that moment, I understood, this wasn't just about survival, it was about dignity, about reclaiming our lives from the jaws of an unforgiving system. "We have to," I replied, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had no idea what the consequences would be if we were caught, but in that moment, the fear of hunger outweighed the fear of the unknown. We loaded up our arms with cans, a makeshift bounty, and stepped back into the night. The cool air hit us like a slap, a stark reminder of the world outside, of the reality waiting for us. The streets were still empty, but this time we carried with us a flicker of hope, a small rebellion against the economic chains that bound us. The pulse of uncertainty throbbed in my chest, but alongside it was the fierce determination to fight back, to claim our future. As we slipped back into the shadows, I knew we were forever changed. The clock continued to tick, a reminder that time was relentless, and each heartbeat echoed our resolve. We were not just surviving, we were clawing our way back into the light, inch by painful inch. The world outside was dark, but within us burned a fire, bright and unyielding, promising that we would not go quietly into that night. We would scream, we would fight, we would survive. And in that moment, as the stars blinked down, I realized the struggle had only just begun. The air crackled with tension, thick enough to choke on. A distant horn blared, cutting through the marketplace, where colors swirled like an artist's palette, vivid oranges from ripe oranges, deep greens from fresh herbs, browns and golds from loaves of bread, all jumbled together on carts that creaked under their weight. But beneath this vibrant tapestry, a violent storm brewed, invisible to the untrained eye, threatening to tear apart the delicate threads binding trade, agriculture, and the lives of those too fragile to withstand the dark forces at play. I remember, the words clawed their way out of me, a desperate whisper caught in my throat. I remember when this place was alive with laughter. The laughter of children running through the market, their hands sticky with honeyed figs, the bartering voices of farmers who came to sell their harvests, and the joy in their eyes when they could finally provide for their families. But now, it was a graveyard of dreams, haunted by the ghosts of what once was. I gripped the edge of the wooden stall, knuckles white, heart racing, as I watched Mara, her face stooped under the weight of despair. Mara was a farmer. Her hands, once strong and calloused from tilling the earth, trembled as she sorted through her dwindling supply of tomatoes. They were overripe, bursting with the weight of unfulfilled expectations, much like her own heart. "We can't keep selling at these prices," she muttered, her voice barely above the din. "The drought, the pests, the trade routes blocked, it's all slipping away." Each word fell from her lips like stones, dragging her deeper into darkness. "We can't afford to lose faith, Mara." I shot back, though doubt gnawed at my insides like a starved rat. Fear, the kind that chills your bones and steals your breath, wrapped around us like shadows creeping at twilight. I could see the flicker of fire in her eyes, a spirit still fighting to rise, but who was I to kindle hope when despair felt so much more real? I could only watch as she wrestled with the demons of her own making. A figure loomed at the edge of the market, Yarrick, the merchant, forever calculating, forever scheming. Clad in layers of fabric that seemed to absorb the light, he waited, eyes glinting like steel. "It's only a matter of time before they come for the rest of it," he had said earlier, voice a low crackle that reverberated through the empty spaces of my mind. "You think they care about people like us? They'll take and take until nothing remains." "Nothing remains," I echoed, the words tasting bitter. What did he know of loss? I sensed he had buried something deep inside, a family perhaps, a heart once filled with love now hardened into stone. But Yarrick was right, in a way. The stories of our past were unspooled, threads of history frayed and broken, and we were left here, fighting over the scraps. A clock ticked somewhere, relentless and taunting, each second dripping away, like the last precious drops of water from a cracked well. Mara's eyes flickered toward Yarrick, and in that moment, a storm raged within her. "What if we," she began, but the words were drowned out by a cacophony of shouting, the familiar sound of desperation rising like the tide. People surged forward, voices blending into a chaotic symphony of fear and anger, demanding fair prices, pleading for their livelihoods. They were waves crashing against the jagged rocks of reality, and I could feel the ocean of emotions threatening to swallow us whole. "Look at them!" Yarrick scoffed, a cruel smile slicing across his face. "They'll tear each other apart before they ever tear down the walls that keep them in chains." I felt the weight of his gaze, a reminder that the system we were trapped in was designed to benefit the few while devouring the many. The world outside was a battleground, a dog-eat-dog existence where survival felt like a cruel joke. I wanted to scream, to claw my way out of this nightmare, but Mara's voice cut through, raw and fierce. "We can't let them divide us. If we unite, if we unite." Yarrick's laughter was dark, echoing around us like thunder. "You think that matters? The powerful will always win. They'll crush us beneath their feet, and we'll be left with nothing but hollow promises." I watched Mara's shoulders sag, the fire in her eyes dimming. But the flicker of hope I saw there was not so easily extinguished. I remember, she leaned closer, whispering as if sharing a secret with the very earth that held us. "I remember when we shared our harvests. I remember when we planted seeds together, when we fought for each other." I took a breath, heavy with memories. "And I remember the laughter, Mara, the joy, the way we celebrated our victories, no matter how small." But those memories felt like a fading echo, slipping through our fingers like grains of sand. The laughter was drowned out by the shouting, the chaos growing ever closer. I could feel the pulse of fear racing around us, a collective heartbeat of desperation. Each second drew us nearer to the brink. Suddenly, a child's cry pierced the air, a sound so raw, so filled with anguish that it sent a shiver down my spine. I turned to see a little girl, clutching a battered stuffed animal, tears streaming down her face. Her innocence was a stark contrast to the harsh reality that surrounded her, and in that moment, I felt the fragility of our situation. As the crowd surged forward, I knew we were standing on the precipice of something monumental, a confrontation not just with each other, but with the very systems that had bound us in chains. The struggle to manage trade, agriculture, and resource distribution was not merely a logistical nightmare, it was a matter of survival, of humanity itself. The tension hung heavy, ripe for a rupture, and I realized we were not just fighting for crops or profits, we were fighting for our souls. And as the storm clouds gathered overhead, I could only hope that the seeds of unity had been sown deep enough to withstand the fury that was about to unleash. Chapter 13, 7. Infrastructure, the costs of greatness. The sun hung low, a molten ball of orange that seared the horizon, spilling shadows like ink across the crumbling pavement. Dust danced in the air, thick as the tension coiling in the hearts of the three figures standing at the center of the abandoned square. I remember how the silence roared, a deafening reminder of what was lost, a promise broken. Here in this desolation, the ghosts of dreams past whispered through jagged cracks in the stone. Jenna's hands trembled as she clutched a rusted pipe, a remnant of the city's former glory. She had once envisioned a world where every child drank clean water, where laughter echoed off vibrant walls, not silence. Her eyes, once bright with ambition, were now pools of despair, reflecting the rubble around her. "We can't keep ignoring it," she pleaded, her voice cracking under the weight of truth. This is just the beginning." Across from her, Marcus stood with his arms crossed, a wall of defiance. The city was collapsing, and he was the architect of its ruin. "You think it's that simple?" His tone was sharp, cutting through the thick air. "You think we can just throw money at broken pipes and expect miracles? Look around. It's too late for that." His words were like stones, heavy and unyielding, tumbling into Jenna's heart, echoing her fears back to her in cruel reverberations. And then, there was Lena, a child of the streets, her small frame swallowed by shadows that seemed to reach out for her, desperate for companionship. She crouched at the edge of the square, her eyes darting between the adults, sensing the tension crackling like an electric storm. "You said we would fix it," she whispered, a fragile plea in a world that had long forgotten hope. The innocence in her voice pierced the night, a stark contrast to the chaos that surrounded them. She didn't understand the politics, the failures, the investments lost to greed, but she felt the effects. She felt the thirst. I remember the way the world shifted then, as if the very ground beneath them trembled in response to their anguish. Time hung heavy, stretching out like a taut string ready to snap. The past entwined with the present, memories of laughter and joy clashing with the haunting reality of decay. "We wanted greatness, didn't we?" Jenna's voice rose, swelling with passionate fury, "and now look at us. Drowning in our own ambition. Infrastructure crumbling because we thought we could build dreams on sand." She scanned the horizon, searching for the silhouettes of skyscrapers that had once promised prosperity but now stood as hollow sentinels, watching over their demise. This city had been a beacon, a testament to what they could achieve together, but ambition had its costs, and pride had a way of blinding the best of them. How did we let it get this far? The question hung in the air, unanswered, a ghost wandering through the ruins. Marcus shifted, his bravado faltering under the weight of guilt. He recalled the meetings, the grand promises made in smoke-filled rooms, the deals that seemed like golden tickets but had turned into shackles. "It wasn't just us," he said, a hint of desperation creeping into his words. "We were all in it together. You can't lay this at my feet alone." But even as he spoke, he felt the truth gnawing at him, a relentless whisper that he couldn't shake off. He was part of the problem. Lena stood now, stepping into the light that had begun to fade, her small hand reaching out toward the broken cityscape. "Can we make it better?" she asked, her voice small, fragile as a spider's web. "Can we really fix it? Please?" The sincerity in her eyes pierced through the layers of resentment and fear, unearthing something buried deep within both Jenna and Marcus, a flicker of hope, a fragile ember that dared to ignite. "Hope costs," Jenna whispered, her heart aching as she grappled with the weight of that truth. She had given so much already, her time, her dreams, her faith in the people who once filled the streets with joy. Every step she took felt like walking on shattered glass, each piece a reminder of the sacrifices made for the promise of greatness. But maybe, she hesitated, glancing at Lena, maybe we can start small. Build it back, brick by brick. Brick by brick, Marcus echoed, the words tasting foreign on his tongue, but there was a rhythm to them, a possibility that sent a shiver down his spine. Together, they would bear the weight of the past, confront the shadows lurking in their memories. They would reclaim what had been lost. But the question remained, at what cost? The ground trembled again, a foreboding reminder that the earth itself was restless, a pulse beneath their feet matched only by their quickening hearts. The ghosts of their decisions flickered around them, casting long shadows that whispered of consequences yet to come. In that moment, standing in the stillness charged with anticipation, they felt a shift in the air, a promise made, not lightly, but with every ounce of strength they could muster. And as the sun began to sink below the horizon, surrendering the day to night, the three stood resolute, framed against the dying light. This was the crossroads, the moment where dreams collided with reality, where the costs of greatness were laid bare before them, heavy and undeniable. Each heartbeat echoed in the darkness, every breath a testament to their resolve, and they knew that this was just the beginning of a long and arduous path. In the silence that followed, the stars began to blink into existence, distant and cold, yet somehow alive with meaning. They were watchful, bearing witness to the struggles of those who dared to dream, who dared to hope. The city might be crumbling, but in that fragile moment, a new resolve was born, a quiet defiance against the inevitable decay. The infrastructure of their dreams was broken, but it was not beyond repair. And they would fight for it, even if it cost them everything. The sun hung low, a molten ember sinking into the horizon, casting long shadows across the crumbling stones of the aqueduct. The air was thick with dust, a choking blanket that settled in the throat. There was a sharp crack, like thunder, but it was only the sound of stone meeting stone as a worker stumbled, an echo of desperation reverberating through the assembled crew. I watched, breath caught in my chest, as he grappled with the unforgiving weight of the world, shoulders bowed under the burden of dreams that felt impossibly heavy. I remember the way his hands trembled, how the dust danced around him, an ethereal shroud veiling his struggle. "Lyra, push the stones into place," shouted Aidan, his voice raw, threaded with urgency. I could see his hands, calloused and weary, desperate to mold the very earth beneath us into something monumental, something that would stand against time's relentless march. But there was a flicker in his eyes, a doubt that cut deeper than the blisters lining his palms. It was a shared doubt, a whispered fear that ricocheted from heart to heart among us, a question we all dared not say aloud, would this be enough? I remember the mornings, waking before dawn, the sky still a blanket of deep indigo. Those moments felt sacred, the air crisp and full of promise. It was a ritual of hope and toil. Yet, there was a darkness lurking beneath the surface, an undertow that threatened to pull us all under. As we carved the land to create our irrigation systems, the water, life itself, slipped through our fingers like grains of sand. "Hold it steady." Aidan bent low, his voice a low growl, echoing through the night as he wrestled with the wooden beam that loomed above him. I could see the sweat glistening on his brow, the way it traced the contours of his face, each droplet a testament to his resolve, but also to the crushing weight of our ambitions. I felt the heat radiating from him, an unyielding fire that pushed us all forward, yet there was a flicker of something else. I knew what lay beneath, the fear of ruin, of failure, that gnawed at him like a ravenous beast. And then there was Myra, her laugh, a melody that hung in the air, sweet yet laced with an edge of sorrow. I adored her, fiercely and hopelessly, yet I saw the way her eyes darted with worry, the way her fingers twisted in her hair as she stood by the edge of the construction site, always watching. "You'll break your back for what?" she would say, her voice filled with both affection and despair. "For a monument that may crumble before we're even dust." Each word was a blade, each laugh a mask, hiding her own tumultuous heart. I remember the way the sun cast her shadow long and thin against the stones, a fleeting reminder of impermanence. "We build for the future," I'd often insist, the words tumbling from my lips like a desperate prayer. But even as I spoke, I felt the whispers of the past swirling around me. Each stone we placed felt like a ghost of dreams unfulfilled, of lives spent in the pursuit of something greater, yet eternally out of reach. The sound of the river was both a lifeline and a curse, its relentless flow a reminder of our inadequacies. Water poured through the cracks of our labor, laughing at our efforts. It was a cruel joke, a cosmic trick that mocked our sweat and toil. Aiden's eyes would glisten with frustration as we fought to redirect the currents, our wills clashing against nature's indifference. "We are nothing without this," he would shout, arms outstretched, as if challenging the very heavens above. I wished I could reach out and show him that even in the face of collapse, we were everything. But the earth trembled beneath our feet, and with it, the weight of our ambitions grew heavier. I remember the night it happened. The rocks we had painstakingly positioned, an intricate puzzle, gave way, falling like a house of cards. The sound was deafening, a cacophony of despair that shattered the silence. I watched as Aiden's face contorted with horror, his dreams crushed beneath the very stones he revered. In that moment, I felt the sharp crack of my own heart, a visceral pain that coursed through me like wildfire. "Why do we keep doing this?" Myra's voice, a fragile whisper in the chaos, pierced the air. There was a haunting beauty in her confusion, a dance between hope and despair that left me breathless. Every hour, every scar, her words hung in the air, thick with the weight of reality. For what? A structure that may outlast us, but will never remember our names. I grabbed her hand, a lifeline in the storm. "No, Myra. It's not just stone and water. It's legacy. It's life." Each word felt like an incantation, a desperate attempt to breathe meaning into our madness. The moon overhead watched with an unblinking eye, its glow a mocking reminder that we were but mortals, driven by an insatiable yearning to imprint ourselves upon the earth. And still we toiled. Day turned to night, and with every passing moment, I could feel the shadows creeping closer, enveloping our hopes in a shroud of doubt. Aiden collapsed to the ground, the weight of the world pressing down upon him. What if it's all for nothing? The question hung in the air, heavy and unyielding, a challenge to the very core of our existence. I wanted to scream, to shake him from his despair, but I could only kneel beside him, the grit of the earth digging into my knees. "We can't stop now," I whispered, my voice trembling with the weight of unfulfilled dreams. "Not when we're so close." In that moment, I felt the fragile threads of our lives intertwine, a tapestry woven from the frayed edges of hope and desperation. We stood together on the precipice of creation and ruin, our hearts echoing the rhythm of the cosmos. Each heartbeat a reminder of our mortality, each breath an act of defiance against the silence that threatened to swallow us whole. And as the stars blinked into existence above us, I knew we were not just building structures, we were carving our souls into the fabric of existence, desperate to be remembered. Yet the river continued to flow, and the earth continued to tremble, as if laughing at our futile attempts to master it. The demands of our labor were unrelenting, a testament to our fragile humanity, forever dancing on the edge of creation and destruction. And in that dance, we found ourselves lost and found, fading into the shadows of our own making, as the echoes of the past whispered secrets we dared not confront, leaving us teetering on the edge of a future we could not fathom. The sirens wailed through the fractured skyline, a mournful hymn echoing off steel giants that seemed to shiver beneath the weight of impending doom. I stood on the balcony of the crumbling embassy, the air thick with tension, heart racing, pulse pounding like a war drum. Below, the streets were alive with chaos, people surged, desperate, fear clawing at their throats as they fought against the tide of uncertainty. A protest? A riot? Or something worse? The lines blurred in an instant, and I felt it, all of it, like shards of glass lodged deep within my chest. Dahlia, my partner in this treacherous dance of diplomacy, clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms. "We have to act," she hissed, fire in her eyes, but there was a tremor in her voice that betrayed her. I could see the ghosts of decisions past flickering behind her gaze, haunting shadows that whispered of promises made and lives lost. She was a warrior, always the first to charge into the fray, yet here, amidst the swirling chaos, I felt her falter. "I remember," I said, forcing the words through a throat constricted with dread. "I remember the way you looked at me when we first stepped into this world. So full of hope, even as the night closed in around us. But hope was a strange bedfellow in the world of diplomacy. It had morphed into something grotesque, a paper-make mask worn to hide the ugly truths beneath. I could almost taste the bitterness of it mingling with the acrid smoke rising from the city streets, where the shadows of anger flitted like phantoms in the night, dancing dangerously close to the edge of reason. Back in the dimly lit conference room, I could still hear the echoes of our last meeting with the representatives from the rival nation. Their faces were masks of calculated indifference, yet their eyes betrayed a hunger for power, a thirst that could be quenched only by chaos. They were predators, and we were the unwitting prey, caught in a game where the stakes were lives, futures, and dreams. We can't trust them, I had said, the words like gravel in my mouth. They will turn on us the moment they see an opening. Dahlia had looked at me as if I were the one losing faith. But who was I to question her zeal? She had always been the light in our darkest moments, a beacon guiding us through the murky waters. But now? Now she was drowning. The thought struck me like a thunderclap, and I turned, searching her face for reassurance but finding only a storm brewing in her eyes. We were both trapped in our own memories, the weight of what we had lost, what we had sacrificed, pressing down like a leaden shroud. The clock ticked incessantly behind us, each second a reminder of our dwindling time, a countdown to something catastrophic. We need to find common ground, she murmured, more to herself than to me. We can't let them win. But what was winning? Was it merely the absence of conflict? Or was it something deeper, an understanding forged in the fires of pain? The thought of her walking into negotiations with an enemy willing to toy with human lives sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to scream, to shake her and tell her to see the truth, the visceral reality that lay beneath the surface, to realize that every handshake was a potential dagger. I remember the night we first met, beneath a canopy of stars shimmering like shards of broken glass. She had laughed, a sound so bright it cut through the darkness. You can't possibly think diplomacy is all doom and gloom, she had teased. It's a delicate waltz, one where you have to learn to lead and follow. But now the waltz felt like a funeral dirge, the music twisted and sorrowful, the steps leading us toward disaster. The shadows closed in tighter, and in that moment, I could almost hear the voices of those who had come before us, the whispers of history reminding me of every failed negotiation, every blood-soaked treaty. The ghosts lingered, urging me to act, to fight back against the tide of inevitability that threatened to sweep us all away. Dahlia, I whispered, reaching out to her, fingers brushing against hers, warm yet trembling. What if we? But before I could finish, the wall shook, a roar of anger erupting from the streets below. I could feel the vibrations in my bones, the pulse of the city surging like a living creature. In that moment, I realized we were no longer merely observers, we were participants in a violent ballet, every choice we made entwined with the fate of thousands. The stakes had never been this high. I had always known the dangers, the constant threat of war looming like a storm cloud on the horizon. But here I was, standing on the precipice, the once clear line between right and wrong dissolving into shadows. Listen, I urged, desperation creeping into my voice, we need to turn this around, make them see our humanity, our willingness to connect. But the heartbeat of the city surged louder, drowning out my words. The shadows seemed to pulse, beating against the walls of reason, blurring the lines of morality. I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass, a warrior ready to charge into the fire. Yet behind that warrior was a woman, scared, scarred, and yearning for a glimmer of hope amidst the despair. We can't do this alone, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it echoed in the hollow of my chest like a gunshot. But what choice do we have? The world won't wait for us to find our footing. A fleeting thought crossed my mind, what if we failed? What if our attempts at peace crumbled beneath the weight of old grudges and fresh wounds? The thought was suffocating, like the smoke rising from the burning chaos outside. But then I remembered the faces of those counting on us, the ones who had entrusted us with their futures. We will do this together, I vowed, grasping her hand tighter, feeling the warmth of her spirit seep into my own, the fragile hope sparking between us like a flickering candle in the darkest night. The sirens wailed louder, a cacophony that could drown out the stars. But we would fight back, clawing our way through the shadows, refusing to let despair claim us. The final clash loomed ahead, a confrontation between fear and resolve, and as we stood on the edge, the world held its breath, teetering on the brink of something unimaginable. Time passed in a blur, the night thickened around us, rich with the scent of burning dreams and fading hopes. Yet somewhere, amidst the chaos, I felt the pulse of possibility, an electric charge that thrummed between us, daring us to take that leap into the unknown, where the ghosts of history could either bind us to our despair or guide us to a new dawn. And so we stood, not as mere ambassadors of our nations, but as human beings bound by the relentless pursuit of peace, ready to confront the shadows together. The city roared beneath us, but somehow, in the heart of that tempest, I found a thread of courage, a whisper saying that maybe, just maybe, we could still turn the tide. The clash of swords echoed like a heartbeat through the valley, each metallic ring a dreadful promise, a reminder that the ghosts of our ancestors watched from the shadows. I stood there, frozen, the weight of the unshed tears heavy in my chest. Around me, the scent of iron mingled with the pungent earth, and I was caught, my breath caught in my throat, my heart pounding like a battle drum, each thud a reminder of choice, of fate, of the thin line between ally and enemy. Jasper, my brother by blood but not by fate, was shouting orders. His voice cut through the mayhem, fierce and unyielding. "Flank them! We must push forward!" I watched him, a figure of raw determination, his face a mask of anger and fear. Memories swirled in my mind like autumn leaves caught in a storm, how we had played as children in the rolling fields, carefree, chasing dreams rather than swords. But now those dreams lay shattered at our feet, replaced by alliances forged in desperation and the bitter taste of betrayals. I remember that day, under a sky bruised with the promise of rain, when the emissaries from Verdun arrived. Their robes whispered secrets, a conspiratorial rustle that unnerved me. They held our fates in their hands, their words a sweet poison, draped in silk but steeped in treachery. I wanted to scream, to warn Jasper, to tear down their veils of charm that concealed blades thirsting for blood. But I said nothing, my silence a weight that pushed me deeper into the ground. It was then I realized the cost of loyalty, a price measured not in silver and gold but in the very essence of who we were. And then there was Ilara, fierce and beautiful, a flame in the encroaching darkness, her spirit unyielding like the ancient oaks that dotted our land. My heart ached for her, a twisted knot of longing and fear. She was a diplomat, a whisperer of words, effortlessly gliding through the treacherous waters of negotiation. But beneath her composed exterior, I saw the flicker of doubt, the ghost of her own past that haunted her dreams. I remember the time she confided, "Every piece I broker feels like a betrayal to someone." Those words hung between us like an echo from a forgotten time, the fragility of trust laid bare. Now, as the battle raged, Ilara fought alongside us, her blade glimmered, a beautiful contradiction amidst the chaos. I watched in awe and horror as she deflected an enemy's blow, her expression a mask of focused ferocity. But I also saw the small tremor in her hands, the way she flinched when a familiar face fell to the ground, the weight of lives lost heavy in the air. Each strike of her sword felt like a desperate prayer for peace, yet peace eluded us like a shadow in the night. "Stay close!" Jasper shouted, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of war. But I was lost, caught in the tremors of my own heart. I could feel the ground beneath me shifting, the very earth trembling with the weight of our choices. Friends became foes, families torn apart by alliances that felt more like chains than bonds. I could taste the bitterness of betrayal on my tongue, a reminder that in this world, trust was a fragile thread, easily severed. As dusk settled over the battlefield, painting the horizon in hues of blood and fire, I sensed the shift in the air. The scent of burnt earth mixed with the sweet decay of hope. In the distance, the banner of our foe fluttered like a taunting ghost, a herald of the darkness creeping closer. The sun dipped behind the jagged mountains, casting long shadows that danced with the echoes of our past mistakes. "Jasper!" I screamed, my voice raw with desperation, but the din of war swallowed my words. In that moment, I felt time stretch, pulling at my very essence. I remembered the stories our father used to tell, of heroes and legends, of alliances forged in honor, but here we were, merely pawns in a game played by gods indifferent to our plight. I thought of the clock hanging in the great hall, its ticking a relentless reminder of time slipping away, a cruel trickery of fate that bound us tighter as we fought to break free. And then, the moment came, our enemies surged forward, a tide of fury and vengeance. It was a collision of wills, a symphony of chaos, and there I was, caught between Jasper and Ilara, their lives intertwined with mine, each moment a heartbeat that thrummed with the weight of our choices. I could see the fear flickering in Ilara's eyes, the unspoken words hanging heavy between us. The air crackled with tension, and I could feel the ghosts of our decision swirling around us, haunting, taunting. Time seemed to slip through my fingers like grains of sand, and I found myself grasping at memories, desperately holding on as the tide of battle loomed closer. The laughter of our childhood echoed, a cruel reminder of innocence lost. In that battleground, amidst the blood and the fury, I remembered the warmth of Ilara's hand, the strength of Jasper's spirit, and how the bonds we forged were both our armor and our chains. "Together?" I shouted, the words bursting forth like a dam breaking, the urgency infused with the rawness of my soul. "We fight together!" But even as I spoke, I knew that in the heart of every alliance, there lay the seeds of conflict, the fragile balance we danced upon like a knife's edge. I could feel the weight of the universe pressing down, the stars above indifferent to our plight, each flicker a reminder of the countless souls lost in the struggles of power and pride. And just as the storm of battle reached its peak, I held on to one truth amidst the chaos, a conviction that no matter what happened next, the ties of love and loyalty would be the compass that guided us through the dark. In that fleeting moment, the world around us blurred, and I perceived the vastness of our struggles, the insignificance of our individual lives against the backdrop of the cosmos. And though the outcome was uncertain, I felt an unyielding sense of purpose surge within me. As I lunged forward, heart pounding and breath hitching, I understood, this was not just a fight for our land or our lives. It was a fight for the very essence of who we were, and as the first clash of steel rang out, I felt the pulse of fate quicken, irrevocably drawing us into the depths of this dark and beautiful dance with destiny. Chapter 17, 9. Succession crises and the fragility of leadership. The clock chimed ominously, each stroke echoing through the empty halls like a heartbeat lost in the shadows. In a dimly lit chamber, the air thick with tension, Evelyn stood frozen, her hands trembling against the cold stone. Her heart raced, a wild, desperate drumbeat in her chest. Tonight, the walls would bear witness to a reckoning, a fragile leadership teetering on the brink of collapse. She could feel it in her bones, the weight of her father's crown casting a long, dark shadow over her. "I remember the day he first placed it on my head," she whispered to the empty room, her voice barely a breath. "I was just a girl, lost in dreams of conquest and glory. But here I am, a woman on the precipice of ruin." Outside, the winds howled, a chorus of chaos swirling around the castle like a tempest, a fitting backdrop for the turmoil raging within her. The throne room felt like a haunted grave, memories of laughter now replaced by whispers of betrayal. She could sense them gathering, the council, the vultures ready to pick at the bones of her authority. A stray memory flickered to life, her father's once proud laughter now swallowed by time, buried under the weight of ambition and greed. She took a step forward, breath hitching in her throat. The grand tapestry on the wall, depicting victories long past, felt like a cruel reminder of what was slipping through her fingers. In that moment, she was not just a leader, she was a daughter, grappling with a legacy she never chose. And then there was Marcus, her brother, the dark horse of their family, lurking in the shadows of her mind. His ambition smoldered like a hidden fire, ready to consume everything in its path. "I remember the way he looked at me when father named me heir," she thought bitterly. The way his eyes flickered with envy, hatred cloaked in brotherly affection. He would come for her, she knew it. The council swayed in his favor, their whispers slithering through the corridors like snakes seeking warmth. In the depths of night, she could almost hear their plotting, a cacophony of voices that merged into one insidious chant: "He is the rightful king. He is the future." But what of her? Did she not have the heart of a lion? Did her spirit not swell with the same fire that once ignited her father's reign? She closed her eyes, summoning memories of the battlefield, the clash of swords, the roar of victory. She could taste the salt of sweat and blood, the rush of power coursing through her veins. "This throne is mine," she murmured, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. A sudden crash shattered the darkness, a door flung open, revealing Marcus, his silhouette framed by the flickering torchlight. The chaos outside seemed to quiet, the air thickening with the tension of an impending storm. He stepped into the room, a ghostly figure dripping with charisma, the kind that could draw in the unwary with a glint of charm and a wicked smile. "Evelyn," he drawled, his voice smooth, like honey laced with poison. "How quaint, standing here all alone. Do you not feel the weight of our father's crown pressing down upon you? It looks heavy." The insult hung in the air, a sharp blade poised to strike. "You think you can take it from me?" she shot back, her voice steady despite the turmoil swirling within. "You think the council will bow to you because you whisper sweet lies into their ears?" He stepped closer, invading her space, and she could see the darkness in his eyes, a storm brewing beneath the surface. "It's not about their loyalty, sister. It's about strength. And you, dear Evelyn, are too soft. Too sentimental. You'll never survive this world." Her breath caught, the truth cutting deeper than any blade. She could feel her heart pounding, not just in fear, but in the realization that he was right. The world they inhabited was a ruthless beast, and kindness was a luxury she could no longer afford. "What are you suggesting?" she asked, her voice steady, but her pulse quickened with the weight of the moment. "Join me," he said, a sly smile playing on his lips. "Together, we could forge a new future. I would take the throne, but you would wield the power behind the scenes. A perfect alliance, sister. Imagine it." The thought sent chills cascading down her spine. A partnership built on betrayal was a delicate dance, one that could crumble at the slightest misstep. "And what happens when you decide you no longer need me?" She glared, every ounce of her being resonating with defiance. "What happens when the lion turns on the lamb?" He chuckled, but the sound was hollow, echoing through the chamber like a death knell. "You see, that's where you're wrong. The lamb could become a wolf when the time is right, couldn't she?" A sudden flash of realization struck her, plunging her thoughts into chaos. Could she trust him? Could she betray him, even before his betrayal began? The weight of leadership pressed upon her like a vice, suffocating in its intensity. She could feel the ghosts of their father's reign, specters of doubt and fear swirling around them, haunting her every decision. "I remember the stories of our ancestors," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, raw with emotion. "How they fought for what was theirs, how they bled for their kingdoms. They didn't cower in the face of betrayal." Marcus stepped back, his expression shifting from faux charm to something darker, a flicker of rage igniting within him. "You think you're some kind of warrior? You're merely a girl in a man's world, Evelyn. A fragile glass doll waiting to shatter." And in that moment, the truth settled upon her like a heavy fog. Leadership was not just a title, it was a battle, a dance upon the edge of a knife. What would she sacrifice to keep her place? Would she shatter like glass, or would she rise, a phoenix from the ashes of betrayal? The air crackled with tension, heavy with unspoken words and unbroken promises, shadows flickering on the walls like specters of the past. Time hung suspended, every breath a prelude to chaos, every heartbeat a challenge to survive this night. Evelyn squared her shoulders, an ember igniting within her, a spark of defiance against the darkness looming. "Let the council decide then," she breathed, a quiet determination settling into her bones. "But know this, brother, I will not be crushed under the weight of your ambition. I will fight." As the wind howled once more outside, the storm brewing within mirrored the chaos of the world around them, a fragile leadership on the brink, a reckoning waiting to unfold. In that charged silence, the clock ticked relentlessly, counting down to an uncertain fate. The shadows danced, and the echoes of ambition and betrayal loomed closer, a dark symphony in the night. The clock was ticking, a steady metronome counting down the breaths left in the room. The air was thick, almost suffocating, as I stood in the shadowed corner, watching the figures collide like storm clouds, brewing chaos that would shatter any semblance of peace. One moment, they were family; the next, they were rivals locked in a battle for power, passion igniting like wildfire between them. I could hear the tremors in their voices, each word a dagger aimed at the other's heart, each accusation a flash of lightning illuminating the storm brewing in their souls. Anna stood at the center, her hands trembling, fingers clenching and unclenching as if grasping at something, some shred of dignity, perhaps, or the remnants of a love that was now cloaked in betrayal. I remember the way her eyes glistened, filled with tears that reflected years of devotion turned to ash, burning brightly yet painfully against the backdrop of their family legacy. "You don't own this," she shouted at her brother, the word this hanging in the air like a noose. "You think blood binds you to the throne? You think it gives you a right to decide our fate?" Adam, her brother, stood defiant yet visibly shaken. His chest heaved, a lion cornered, trapped between loyalty to his lineage and the growing realization that his sister was no longer just the girl who played with dolls in the garden, she was a tempest, fierce and unyielding. "It's not just a throne, Anna. It's our birthright," he barked, his voice breaking, the weight of tradition pressing down like a vice. I remember the way he ran a hand through his hair, a desperate gesture that spoke of anxiety, of confusion, of a heart that had once beat in rhythm with his sister's but was now out of sync, a discordant note in an already chaotic symphony. Outside, the sky darkened, clouds rolling in thick and heavy. And in that moment, I knew this was no mere family squabble over wealth or power, this was the birth of a rift that could fracture their world. I felt the tension in the room pulse like a living thing, each accusation, each rebuttal a heartbeat of an impending catastrophe. I shuddered, a cold sweat creeping down my spine, as the realization sank in, the stakes were higher than anyone could comprehend. The echoes of their voices reverberated in my mind, a haunting reminder of how easily trust could turn to venom. I could almost taste the bitterness, like iron on my tongue, a reminder of the blood that had once united them, now threatening to spill over the edges of their familial bond. A legacy built on unity was crumbling into a battlefield where love was the first casualty. How did we come to this? I found myself asking, gripping the wall for support, feeling the cool stone beneath my fingers, a stark contrast to the warmth of the betrayal swirling around us. Anna's voice cracked, sharp and brittle. "You think being born first gives you the right to dictate my life? To choose what I become?" There was a ferocity in her words that struck me, an embodiment of every woman's struggle to break free from the chains of expectation. "I will not be your pawn," she spat, her defiance igniting a fire within me, a flicker of hope in an otherwise darkening landscape. But Adam was already lost in his turmoil, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes transform into a storm, a whirlwind of emotions battling for supremacy. "You don't understand," he shouted. "If I don't take this mantle, everything we know will fall apart. The kingdom will crumble, and with it, our family." His words hung heavy in the air, thickening the tension until it felt like it could break, shatter into a million fragile pieces. In that moment, I knew that more than their relationship was at stake. The stability of their entire world hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of a precipice, waiting for one misstep to send it all tumbling down. I felt my heart race, the pulse of fear synchronizing with their rising voices, a frantic rhythm drumming in my ears. It was more than a dispute, it was a war brewing beneath the surface, a fight not just for power, but for the very soul of their family. Then came the moment of silence. An eerie pause, as if the world held its breath, waiting for the next move, the next word that would shatter the fragile equilibrium. I could see the shadows flickering against the walls, the ghosts of their pasts, the laughter and love that once filled their home now cast aside like forgotten toys. In this charged stillness, a realization washed over me, cold and clammy. They were not just battling for a throne, they were battling against the very fabric of their existence. "I remember," Anna whispered, her voice suddenly soft, a haunting echo of memories shared beneath starlit skies, of whispered secrets and dreams woven together like golden threads. "I remember when we believed in us." That statement hung in the air, a fragile bridge extending between them, a reminder of what had been sacrificed at the altar of ambition. But Adam was too far gone, the weight of expectation drowning out the echoes of love. "That was before," he said bitterly, his eyes narrowing, darkening. "That was before you decided to betray our family." The word betray cut through the night, sharp and merciless. Her face fell, a crack appearing in the facade of strength she had built around her heart. The very essence of their shared history of laughter and familial bonds was splintering under the pressure of this singular moment. I could feel the air crackle with the intensity of their pain, the veiled threat of what lay beneath, the potential for destruction. Time slowed, and I felt the pulse of the world around us, the heartbeat of a kingdom poised on the brink of collapse. I remember thinking, if this was how it felt to stand on the edge of chaos, how far would they fall? How deep would the wounds run? The silence was a mere prelude to the storm. I braced myself, knowing the confrontation was inevitable, the climax of their emotional turmoil hanging just above the horizon, waiting to ignite. Outside, the winds began to howl, a foreboding symphony playing in concert with the tempest brewing inside, the clock ticking down to an uncertain future. The next breath, the next word, could unleash a deluge, a flood of consequences that would spiral far beyond this room, beyond their lives, cascading through the corridors of power, echoing in a future that felt dangerously fragile. And as I stood frozen in the shadows, heart racing, I realized, this was not just a family fight, this was a moment that could alter the course of history forever. The executioner's blade glints under the dim light of the torch, a flicker of anticipation hanging heavy in the air. It's a moment suspended in time, like a heartbeat waiting to drop into silence. I stand in the crowd, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm, each pulse drawing me closer to the morbid spectacle. The whispers ripple through the masses, a wave of anxiety blending with the unmistakable scent of fear. They say a ruler must be strong. But strength, I realize, bears its own burden. Silence! The voice of the herald booms, echoing against the weathered stones, shattering the collective breath held tight in our throats. I squint against the flickering light, searching for the figure in the throne, the one who holds our fate in trembling hands. A leader should inspire, that was the code we lived by. Yet, I can see the tremors of doubt lurking behind the ruler's porcelain face. Eyes darting, he is a marionette tangled in his own strings. I remember the first time I felt the weight of those expectations. It was a night draped in fog, the moon hung low, cloaked in silver. I was young, wild with dreams that danced like flames in my chest. I thought rulers were warriors, figures carved from granite, etched in tales of valor. But standing here, witnessing this grim ceremony, I see the cracks in the stone, the way the shadows twist and curl around their feet like forgotten whispers. Meris stands by my side, her hands trembling. "Do you think he'll do it?" she breathes, her voice barely a flicker against the roar of uncertainty. I glance at her, the light illuminating the scattered freckles across her nose, a constellation of innocence overshadowed by the brutality before us. She expects salvation, a hero emerging from the chaos, but all I see is the weight of duty crushing the spirit of the man on the throne. "He must," I whisper, though my heart churns with disbelief. The crowd swells with anticipation, a rising tide of thrumming energy. I catch a glimpse of his face again, pale, haunted, and wearing a crown that seems to weigh as much as the very world it represents. They expect him to be resolute, to embody their dreams. But what of his? A ruler's heart is a battleground. I remember when he was just a boy, laughing with friends in the courtyard, dreaming of dragon-slaying adventures. But dreams shift as the years crush them, like flowers underfoot. The crown, I'd always thought, would bring him strength. But now I see it, the crown is a shackle, binding him to the screams of the people, to the weight of their hopes, their despair. The executioner raises his weapon high, the crowd erupts, a roar of bloodlust reverberating against the cold stone walls. It's intoxicating, and yet, I feel a chill crawl up my spine. Meris grabs my arm, her nails biting into my flesh. "What if he falters?" she gasps, her voice trembling with fear. I want to soothe her, to say he is a ruler, a god among mortals. But deep down, I am terrified too, my own fears lurking in the shadows of my heart. "Then we are lost," I reply, the words tasting bitter. For what happens when a ruler falters? When they become human, vulnerable? They transform from savior to sacrifice, a pawn in a game played by unseen hands. I glance sideways at Meris, her eyes shine with a fierce hope as if she believes in him still. But I see, oh, how I see, the ghosts of those forgotten in the name of power, the sacrifices made for a throne gilded in blood. The blade falls. A gasp slips through my lips, and I stagger back, the world around me blurring into a haze of swirling shadows. My thoughts spiral, and I see the leader, the monarch, crumpling, the weight of a crown choking the very breath from his lungs. He's no longer a ruler, he's a ghost, a wraith haunted by the cries of the condemned. I remember the first time I embraced the darkness, the first time I understood the fragile line between power and despair. Maris is crying now, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. He can't be this way, she whispers, her heart breaking like glass underfoot. We need him to be strong. But beneath the veneer of strength lies vulnerability, and I want to scream that we are all bound by the same chains, each of us a ruler in our own right, wrestling with the weight of choices. Shadows flicker, and I see the flicker of doubt mirrored in the eyes of those around me. Their hope is a candle in a storm, trembling but refusing to be extinguished. But how long until that flame dies? The crowd is restless, a boiling cauldron of desperation. I can feel the tension coiling tighter, each heartbeat sinking with the pulse of fear that runs through us. They expect him to be perfect, I murmur to Maris, my voice a thread weaving through the chaos. But no ruler can bear the weight of gods, each is human, flawed. I look back to the throne, catching the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He is not a monster, but a man, an amalgamation of dreams and nightmares, a reflection of us all. The blade of duty may have struck, but it's the aftershock that shakes the bones of society, echoing the truth buried beneath the surface. We all expect the impossible, yet we forget the cost of that expectation. In the distance, a clock tolls, its sound a haunting reminder of time slipping away, of choices made and choices lost. I feel the urgency, the pulse of history as it races forward, demanding sacrifice. I catch Maris's gaze, her heart searching for solace, for a savior. But I know the truth, everyone wears a crown, but the weight is often unbearable. In this dark hour, what will the ruler choose? To save himself, or to stand as the ghost of hope that haunts our dreams? The tension thickens, and I hold my breath, desperate for a glimpse of the man beneath the crown, the boy who once dreamed. But as the shadows stretch and grow, I realize we are all but players on a stage, bound by the expectations we create. And somewhere in the distance, a new dawn waits to break, yet here we stand, caught in the twilight of our own making, teetering on the edge of the abyss. What will become of us, I wonder, as the moments stretch and bleed into one another, forever etched in the tapestry of time? The air crackled, thick with tension, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows over the cobblestone streets of Ithar. A single, mournful bell tolled in the distance, the sound reverberating through the hearts of those gathered at the town square. I stood among them, my pulse racing, my breath shallow, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes, all searching, all desperate for something, anything, to cling to. We were hungry for hope, but what we had was fear, twisted and gnawing, like a hungry dog at our heels. Arlen, our ruler, stood atop the dais, his face a mask of stoic resolve, but I could see the faint tremor in his hand as it gripped the edge of the lectern. He was a man caught between duty and despair, a marionette tangled in the strings of his own making. The city had begun to crumble under the weight of its own expectations, and as ruler, he was the epicenter of that collapse. I remember how his eyes flickered, haunted by the shadows of what we once were, what he had promised us we'd become. I will not let this darkness consume us, he shouted, his voice cracking like ice under pressure. But I could see it, the cracks in his facade, the panic bubbling beneath his bravado. His promises were like whispers in a storm, lost in the chaos of our reality. Around me, the crowd surged, a living organism of fear and anger, each heartbeat a reminder of our collective desperation. Knowing, deep down, that a ruler's failure is not just his demise, it is ours, too. Fiona, the herald of our people, stood beside him, a bright beacon in an increasingly dim world. Her heart was as fiery as her hair, but I could see it flickering. She had once believed in Arlen with the fervor of a child believing in stars, unwavering and pure. Now, however, her face betrayed her growing disillusionment. "But what do we do, Arlen?" she pressed, her voice cutting through the static. "People are starving, the plague creeps closer. We need action." There it was, the truth, raw and unyielding. I could almost taste the bitterness in the air, a dark brew of despair mingling with the remnants of hope. Arlen turned to her, his gaze flickering past her as though she were merely a spectre haunting him. "I am the ruler," he said, the weight of the title hanging heavy. "I will find a way." But those words felt hollow, echoes in a cavern of despair, reverberating with uncertainty and dread. I watched as the tension crackled like a live wire, threatening to snap under the strain. Each moment stretched, the silence deepening into something palpable, something that clawed at the edges of our sanity. Fiona stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper, but I heard every note, each syllable a dagger. "What if you don't?" she asked. "What if everything crumbles? What if you fail?" Arlen's eyes darkened, a storm brewing behind them, but I could see the cracks widening. His duty demanded he stand tall, to be unyielding like the mountains, but inside him was a tempest of doubt. I sensed it, a visceral connection that shot through the crowd like electricity. He was not just a ruler, he was a man, flawed, scared, desperate. In that moment, the city itself held its breath, the air thickening with our collective anxiety. The shadows of past failures loomed, a spectre of what had been, a ruler who had ignored the cries of his people, who had let despair fester until hope was a distant memory. I looked around, seeing the faces of my neighbors twisted in fear, some clutching their children, some whispering prayers. Our society, woven tight with the threads of expectation and duty, was unraveling before our very eyes. What did it mean to lead? To carry the burdens of those who followed? The role of a ruler was meant to be one of benevolence, of clear skies and guiding stars, yet here we stood beneath a churning sky, darkness clawing at our feet, a world teetering on the brink. I remember the stories they told us as children, of kings who wielded swords, who ruled with justice and mercy. I remember the promise that power could be a shelter, a fortress. But now, standing here, I felt none of that. All I felt was the encroaching dread of failure. Fiona's hand found Arlen's, their fingers entwined, a fragile thread of connection in the midst of chaos. "We are with you," she said, her voice trembling yet fierce. "But you must lead us. You must be the light in this void." But what if the light was only an illusion? What if the flicker of hope was merely a reflection, a mirage in the desert of despair? I could see it, the flicker of uncertainty in Arlen's eyes, the fear of letting us down, the terror of becoming the very monster he had vowed to slay. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, a collective heartbeat of doubt and hope. "What if we rise against you?" someone shouted from the back, a voice bold yet trembling. "What if we demand more than you can give?" The question hung in the air, a ghost that refused to dissipate, infusing the moment with a chilling intensity. Arlen's gaze hardened, the resolve returning, but it felt fragile, like glass on the verge of shattering. "You would turn against your own," he challenged, and I could see the flicker of anger, mingled with the fear. But beneath that anger lay a deeper truth. The weight of our expectations could crush him, could unravel the very fabric of this society we had built together. And as I stood there, heart racing, breath caught in my throat, I realized this wasn't just about him. It was about us all, the hope, the despair, the raw, pulsating reality of our existence. A ruler, a leader, they carry the very essence of our dreams and fears. When they fail, we all fall. The air thickened with unspoken words, and for a moment, time seemed to stretch. I felt the pulse of the city, the hum of desperation, the silent prayers for salvation. I saw, in Arlen's eyes, the flickering candle that could either light the way or ignite the flames of destruction. And in that moment, I knew, we were teetering on the edge of something monumental, something that could either bind us together or tear us apart. The question hung, shimmering like a star on a dark horizon, would we rise together, or would we burn? And as night fell, the shadows loomed larger, the clock ticking, each heartbeat echoing with a promise, or perhaps a warning. The price of failure was steep, a chasm that could swallow us whole. In the distance, the sound of hooves clattering against stone echoed, a harbinger of what was to come. And all around, I felt the weight of our choices, tethered to the roles we played, the duties we bore. The choices lay ahead, a dark road winding into the unknown. There was no turning back, only the relentless pull of fate.